be great if wars could just be fought by the podcasts who started them?
Wait,
replacing the word assholes. Now, I think I got in my head. I said right before we started recording, I think I'm going to struggle this entire miniseries on the difference between Costner and Biden.
Biden's just older. He's got to youth it up.
Felt like I used to have a good Costner.
Sure.
From time spent in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Costner's someone who like you should be able to do like an impression of because he has a more distinctive voice. Yeah. But especially in the 90s, he's got the very California vibe. And now he's like,
there's like, Yeah,
he is one of those guys who secretly you're like, oh, of course, you're from like the wilds of Montana, right? He's like, no, he's not. But anyway, carry on.
The first thing he ever said to me when they introduced me to him on the set of Draft Day, on my first day of filming, he went, so where are you from? And I went, New York. And he went, New York. A real actor, not one of these surfer guys.
Right.
Or no,
you told me that before, I think.
He said, not like one of these bodyboarders.
Wow. Bodyboarders found dead in the water.
Yeah. And I immediately was like, I don't know if I'm a real actor. I just live in New York.
What if you then turned around and you were holding a boogie board and you're just like, oh, forget
boogie board. Sorry, I said bodyboarder. It was boogie board.
I will say, I look at you and I can tell you've never been on a boogie board. So.
And he clocked that correctly. But yes, no, there is that there's that part of him that's like half cowboy, half surfer dude. Right. Mm-hmm. Very laconic.
Biden's, even when he's old, he's got more.
They're mushing
Biden
together in the middle.
To do.
Biden's hard to do.
Like Biden is not like, there's a reason he's not been easy to like do on SNL.
I mean,
or whatever.
it's the fascinating thing of like, no one had a Biden. Even like when Sudeikis did Biden on SNL, it was one of those things where it's like, he's just made a character with a Biden
He's
wig.
made something completely up that's not resembled a man at all. Right.
And then Dana Carvey did that one interview where he's like, I think I figured out Biden. And now everyone, once again, just does their impression of Dana Carvey's impression.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Who does it now? Because it's not Johnson.
Because they didn't want him to play both.
Of course, it makes sense.
So now it's Mikey Day. And it's like Mikey Day is doing an impression of James Austin Johnson's impression of Dana Carvey. Which, like, Jaz's fucking Biden is good, but it's also, like, his Trump is better. And everyone is just doing, once again, like, the George H.W. Bush, like, oh, we just all took the rhythms of what Dana Carvey identified.
You gotta... the economy.
Remember when Jim Carrey did Fire Marshal Bill for a year as Biden?
Yes.
And everyone was just like, this is bad. Universally, there was never any interest in it whatsoever. And they were just like, Carrey's coming back for 6 more.
Right. And then Biden was elected president and they were like, so what we need to do is like find someone who can actually be here every single week. Woody Harrelson.
He was the best Biden.
And they did it 3 times. He made a ton of sense as Biden, but he did it 3 times. It's like, what a surprise. Woody Harrelson doesn't want to commit to a schedule.
He'd be good in this.
This is almost like a full hour of conversation. Here's my biggest take on this movie right off the bat, and I'm interested to hear if the two of you agree with me. On paper, it seems like you can see the world in which Kevin Costner directing this movie is a good choice. And you can see the world in which Kevin Costner starring in this movie is a good choice. And him doing both is disastrous.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
Definitely a huge problem. It's kind of like Live by Night, like the thing where Affleck finally let himself.
Fascinating Live by Night comparison point.
Right,
yes.
like Affleck, because like Affleck's the lead of Argo, obviously, but that's an ensemble movie.
He's doing the yeoman's work.
Right, and then in Live by Night, Affleck's like I'm going to finally star again. I guess he's the star of the town, so maybe I should take it back. But even
then, that's a movie where he's letting everyone else have the color.
There's like a kind of movie that the person directing can also star in. And it's not a movie where they're playing a messiah figure.
No, it's not.
Ever.
Especially after you've already
in the water.
kind of done it once. Yes. No, but the whole time I just kept flipping back and forth in the mental exercise of, okay, is it better if Costner directs? And if so, who stars? Or is it better if he stars? And if so, who needs to be directed?
I think it's better if he directs. I don't think
so
you should be starring. Clearly, he's never directed a film that he didn't star in. So clearly, he just wants to star in the movie.
Package deal.
This is my take on this. Is he should direct? He should have played like one of the mayors or sheriffs in one of the towns, and Billy Bob Thornton should have been the guy.
I mean, Thornton is hot right in 1997. That's acceptable to me. Woody.
Here's my galaxy brain take I had about halfway through watching. What if Costner played the Will Patton role?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you're right. I think the guy you have to
interesting.
cast as the postman is less of a conventional marquee idol guy.
To be clear,
Yeah.
this, if you're doing the same 3-hour movie, probably does not fix this film. Unless you guys love this movie. Do you guys love this movie?
No.
I liked it more than I remembered liking it, but it doesn't work.
I had never
There's
seen
stuff.
it before. I was rooting for it so hard.
Great.
This is a movie where I'm like,
I just feel like we're exactly the same.
I
place.
want-
the first 45 minutes.
yeah.
I thought the gas was on.
And I was like, this thing isn't perfect, but
Right.
I'm like building my defense for why it deserves a little more respect on its name.
It's not just that the oven stops working. Like the oven turns into, I don't know, a washing machine.
I'd
Like
say-
it's like the gas is gone.
I'd say first hour, you're like, this isn't a perfectly functioning oven, but I could make dinner in this. What is everyone complaining about? And the second hour, you're like, the gas has been turned off, but it's still kind of a nice looking oven. And I'm remembering the meals I had. And then the third hour, you were like, the oven is caught on fire and it's burning down my entire apartment.
It's the first hour's oven, second hour's like easy bake oven, where you're like, and then the third hour is like some guy just comes in and sits on the food, and you're like, well, it's going to be warm.
Someone's like shining a flashlight on a turkey.
You're holding a magnifying glass in the sun, trying to cook it by heat. Yeah, no, it is the fascinating example of a movie that just gets worse and worse as it goes on.
I watched it on a plane, and like watching it on a plane was a great experience because it was a long flight. I was stuck with this movie. You know, the people next to me were watching Wish on their little in-screen, and I was like, this movie seems like it doesn't work at all. And The Postman seemed good in comparison.
Is gonna end, and you're gonna have to watch Wish 2 more times before you land.
Exactly.
Right.
And so like in that environment, I was like, this movie's kind of working for me. And then the last hour, I was like, oh no, this is a disaster. Like,
And you're watching the whole time I'm watching it, and I'm like, I bet he nails the last hour. I bet even with this movie having some inherent issues, the last hour is going to work on some sort of base, like rah-rah, sort of nationalistic whatever. And then you're like, completely falls apart.
Yeah.
But you also saw this movie in theaters.
I saw it in theaters. I've read the book. I am weirdly the one person in America prepared to discuss The Postman.
I was wondering if you'd read the book. The book, I'm going to ask, sounds cool. Is the
I
book
am
good?
rereading it right now because I was like, I remember this book being great. It is more overwritten than I remember in that
Sure.
manner of 80s sci-fi, but it's
Hard sci-fi
pretty
guy.
fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I'm sure this is in the dossier.
Emma has always been recommending his, what's it called? The Uplift.
fancy-
Oh, The Uplift
Okay.
is so good.
Right.
Yeah.
Like his masterful
Yeah.
hard sci-fi trilogy.
Was this
on the
originally
States.
serialized in like...
Yes. The
Sci-fi
first,
dra-
so
right.
it is in 4 parts, although the 4th part is basically an epilogue. The first 2 parts are novellas that were placed in magazines. And then he was like, I'm going to write a 3rd part,
Okay.
pull it all together. This movie mostly adapts the first section, which is a smart choice, and then they tack on some of the third, which is like a final battle.
I would say that's the bad choice.
Yeah.
That's one of the bad
Yes.
choices. There's a few.
Right.
The Postman. Griffin. We're here. Well, what's the podcast?
It's Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David. I'm David.
I'm David.
I'm pinning this for a moment. Post intro. Something about Costner line delivery. It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers, such as winning Best Picture the first time out, making one of the highest grossing films in history up until that point. Way up there.
Those are 2 different things, right?
Dances with Wolves was one of the higher grossing.
It was like number 2 in 1990. I mean, only
Yeah.
because Home Alone
I'm not saying it
came
was a
out.
top 10 movie
Made
of
a
all
lot of
time.
money. You're not wrong. I mean, I'm always bad at knowing, what was on what list when, but
And
it made
Box
a
Office
ton of
Mojo
money.
doesn't let you adjust anymore. I'm like, I kind of believe at the time of its release, it was probably in the top 25 highest grossing films of all time.
One day, you know what? It's going to be a project of mine. I'm going to build my own list.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure it out so I know what the top 25 was in any given year.
I used to just
If anyone wants to get on that for me, I will give you a few $1,000s.
This is going to be
That's a true promise.
This is going to be your model railroad. Like when
Right.
your kid's like 13 and like she's like got stuff going on, you're going to be like in your basement making a spreadsheet.
It was an inexact science, but like fucking Box Office Mojo used to have the drop down menu of any year, and you could go like,
used to have hope and jobs and cash.
what numbers
and box office
would
Mojo.
the 2017 films make in 1945? Like that's when I would start like zooming out in weird directions.
Your Galifianakis at the
Yes.
poker table
Yes.
or whatever it is. Yes.
This series is called Podcasts with Wolves.
That's right.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
We podcast with wolves, and it's such they've given us that title.
This is the second film in the directorial filmography of one Kevin Costner.
Which is already a classic mistake of like, and it's very similar to the Affleck thing of like, wow, you know what? You proved us all wrong. You're a serious filmmaker and you did it well with yourself at the center. And then he's like, I'm going to make a bunch of other shit before I direct again.
Well, we'll talk about the acting he did in between.
Made several great films in that period, and he made several very bad films in that period as well.
And he like weirdly, his blank check extended to the people he worked with. Because like
absolutely,
Wyatt Earp and Waterworld do not exist. Yeah,
without it's why we're covering him. The amount of blank checkness around this man.
Right.
Obviously helped by the fact that he was a huge movie star, on top of the fact that his directorial debut was a Oscar-winning Best Picture blockbuster. It's like 20 years of blank check. And now he's doing it again.
The biggest, writing his own check.
Which is he got because he's so big on television.
Everything about it's insane.
Everything about his career is interesting.
Insane. But like for him to take 7 years off from fully directing a movie again, when he had a lot of projects in between, some worked, some didn't, where he was a major authorial voice, if not the dominant voice. When he's like, I'm back and I'm making the Postman, I do think it sets in place a bunch of expectations of like, well, remember how good Dances with Wolves is.
There's so much of this that's smart.
He's
like,
going to swing back.
The idea, like this is a Western, but in a different mode. It's everything about it should work and it doesn't.
I'll crack open the dossier in a minute, but we'll introduce our guest.
Hi.
We're talking today, the Postman.
Okay, right. Yes, I said that. That I said.
Our guest today returned to the show, Emily St. James.
Hi.
Of Yellow Jackets.
Yellow Jackets and like 5 billion other things.
This man wears a blue jacket.
Yeah. Ooh.
You write Yellow Jackets. The Postman wears a blue jacket.
I should like work some, you know what? It's set right now. We're in 1997. In the past, they're in the Canadian wilderness. They have no knowledge of pop culture, but they should just start talking about the Postman. It should just like come to them fully formed.
Lorelai Gilmore review, which I just put on Letterboxd. Did you see it? Postman, Tom Petty playing Tom Petty, that great big speech about once upon a time there was a thing called mail. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll make you want to mail something. She's saying this to Rory as Rory's like running out the door or whatever. You know, it's what you must remember.
Yes.
That was just lodged in my brain. I have seen bits of this movie on cable over the years or whatever. I've probably seen like a funny clip or two, like in a sort of like, you know, famous flops kind of like sizzle reel. But most of all, I just think of Lorelai saying, it'll make you want to mail something. Because you're like, well, it can't really be about like mail, right? Like it's not about like mailing letters as some sort of movement. And it's like, really that's literally what it's about.
Right. Because
like what America needs is mail.
This movie in several ways was different than what I had thought it was. But I had always thought it was, he has like the last bag of mail and he's Johnny Appleseed going across this broken country, delivering the final letters.
Which is not wrong.
It's part of the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this movie is a liar and an actor. Assumes this identity, then it becomes enough of a thing that he does have to do that, but then it becomes that he basically becomes this political figure ideal.
Right. Pretty quickly.
Right. That starts a revolution, but also makes people love mail again. That it's new letters.
And I like mail.
I do.
Mail's good.
I would say, in a way, it is quietly the most successful aspect of this film. Was watching it, I did truly go, I should write more letters. Like Lorelai Gilmore, be damned. I was like, it does kind of make me want to mail something.
It is, the thing about this movie is that it has aged, its messaging has aged very well in a way that the movie itself has not.
And it's wild that the movie doesn't work because you're like, culture has fucking caught up to this thing, what you were trying to do in a lot of ways, and the execution is still so fucking sloppy.
In the 90s, people like took the post office for granted.
Yeah.
Mallard Fillmore would make fun of it in the newspaper. Like Mallard Fillmore was like, that was his big grudge, was against the post office. Yeah, and Mallard Fillmore won.
Came from Mallard Fillmore.
Turned him into.
And now the post office is like a shell of itself.
Remember when Mallard Fillmore like drew like a, you know, Jewy caricature of Jon Stewart, like with a giant nose, and then like had to apologize?
I just want to point out, The way you said that sentence made it sound like Mallard Fillmore, the character, also draws his own script.
Bruce Tinsley is the author of... it would because do you remember what I'm talking about? Because the Jon Stewart book had like a fake Mallard Fillmore that ended with Mallard Fillmore just like it was like Mallard Fillmore talking about high taxation. At the end, he just goes, "Oops, I forgot to make a joke."
Yeah,
which is very funny.
Classic Mallard Fillmore.
Yeah, but he hated the fucking post office. Bruce Tinsley, because like when you're a newspaper comic strip, you had to deal with the post office a lot because you had to mail your strips.
Yes,
you do also have to write a whole ass comic strip every day.
Exactly,
and if yours is about a Republican duck. Like you do have to hit some topics over and over.
I've talked about this with the Lockhorns as a child, but that was another one when I was like 3 or 4 and I would make my dad read the funnies to me.
Yes.
Where I'd be like, this is inexplicable, this thing. And he'd be like, you have to understand, it's like this was like that character shares a name with a Nixon speechwriter. And I'd be like, why isn't the duck doing funny things?
No, Millard Fillmore, of course, was the 13th president of the United States, who was famously a racist.
I wasn't saying...
I know.
I was saying, like, supporting characters. Because even he'd try to set me and be like, it's called Mallard Fillmore because Mallard's a name for a duck and Millard was a president. And I'm like, okay, who's this guy? And he's like, oh, God, this guy is... Like, every joke involves so much explaining. And usually was not even funny if you knew the insides. Sorry.
Mallard Fillmore.
War on the Mail in the 90s.
And now we're in the 2020s where the post office has been gutted by Louis DeJoy. And, you imagine him watching this movie and having like a Mr. Potter-esque reaction of like, fuck that guy.
And technology.
Have Costner killed.
Yeah. Like beyond it getting gutted by our government, right? By like tyrants. It also is like, well, we're just texting all day. We don't take the time to sit down and write longhand. And the emotional intensity, like the first moment in the movie where a letter is received by someone is maybe the most emotionally effective part of the movie where you're like, this is an idea.
And like
this idea has some fucking potency.
You read the book and the book is so good on that point. It's so much like this guy finds this bag of mail and he finds just enough people who like read these letters and have emotional reactions. And he realizes like he's an actor in the book too. And he's just like, this is such a powerful thing. And then the book immediately is like, this is a movement and it's important to have this movement and it's important to have society, but it can't be just one guy. And this movie's like, but it's kind of just one guy.
Kind of just the one guy. I mean, that's the Costner thing. It's also the thing that really caught up with this movie in that like, there is this weird balancing act with movie stars where people who become like A-list beloved movie stars, which Costner for a decade was like, if not the definitive guy, was at the absolute top tier. Like just an insane run that basically starts with Untouchables, and this is the hard end of it.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah.
From this moment on, it's like, you're now kind of like a B-list leading man. You still get to be above the title. You still get vehicles, but the movies are not treated the same way with the same importance after this point. This is the last time where he's still presented as like, this man is one of the pillars of America.
To be fair, obviously, Waterworld had blown a giant hole in his career. Right. And this is it's like, you can have one of those, not two.
Right.
And
exactly.
Exactly.
This should have been his comeback. It needed to be his comeback.
R2-D2 like fixed the X-Wing, like Mayday, and he's like, okay. And then whatever. Then the X-Wing crashed into the side of a hill.
If he came off of Waterworld directing his first movie in 7 years and it was good, people would be like, you know what? You shut us up.
I think especially if he's in a supporting part, like we've talked about, like if he's in this, if he gives himself over to the movie and like lets someone else take the lead, whoever that is, even if the movie's not that good, I think,
the Postman.
Postman.
Before I crack open the dossier.
Yeah.
I do just like Dances with Wolves is 1990. It wins Best Picture and Best Director over Goodfellas and made a lot of money. In 1991, he was in Robin Hood and JFK. Robin Hood is a fairly risible movie, but it made a lot of money and had a hit song and was a big deal.
It was a big cultural
JFK
thing.
Is also kind of a risible movie, but it also rocks and made a ton of money and got lots of Oscar nominations.
Risible?
It's got riz.
It's rizzed up.
Risible.
It's got that unspoken riz.
JFK is like just like it's a mountain of bullshit, but it rocks and it's great and it's like so much fun.
No, and it was his sort of low-level version of the Spielberg Schindler's List Jurassic Park year, right? Where it's like, it wasn't breaking everything in the same way, but it's like, He had the movie that was the presumed Oscar frontrunner for Best Picture, where he gives an excellent performance, working with one of the top directors in Hollywood at that moment. And then he has like one of the bigger blockbusters.
Big action movie. Yes, he's doing a terrible accent. Yes, everyone just remembers Alan Rickman from that movie, but still.
It's like
cool.
You 1990 to 1991, it's like this guy is magic.
Yeah.
Right. You can mock him all you want, but he's just like connecting.
When my baby was brand new, my wife and I were like, let's watch a bunch of Costners. I don't know why we made this decision.
America.
Yeah.
A better time.
Right.
Relaxing.
Warm blanket.
Comforting. Yeah.
We caught up on a lot we hadn't seen, including Draft Day, which we had a great time with.
Draft Day is a great movie to watch with your baby because you can kind of just dip in and out and
Babies
you're like,
love
they're going to
Draft
figure
Day.
it out.
Yeah.
But we got to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which we watched all of and we were like, we're kind of done with this guy. So yeah,
he's really annoying in that movie.
The thing about him is his magic period when he's at the top of the world is also when you start getting annoyed by him.
This is the point I was trying to make.
Kind of doing the same thing over and
this
over.
movie star thing, this point I was trying to make is like, there's this weird balancing act of like getting to that level of movie stardom requires some sense of familiarity with the audience where they know you, they feel like they have some intimate relationship with you, and a sense of trust of, I'm buying a ticket for this guy's movie because I'm in on this guy. I'll follow him anywhere. I'll follow him from JFK to Robin Hood, right? The other part of it is there does have to remain some kind of unknowability.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be something that the audience can't quite crack about a movie star, I think, for them to stay. Otherwise, if it's like, yeah, I get it, I know his thing, they get bored and then they like bail out. And this is the movie where it feels like everyone codified. Have you noticed that Kevin Costner keeps positioning himself in the same fucking way in all of these movies? And once it becomes like a meme in that way, where there's a clean handle on it, you're fucking done.
You're
weird. Done.
It's weird because he has this second lane in his star persona of I'm a horny freak.
Yes.
And like he doesn't.
He sure does.
He doesn't like.
You're no
return
way
to
out. Yes, exactly. Yeah. You're Bull Durham.
Like he's got Tin Cup, and that's kind of the end of Kevin Costner's life.
Wait. All right, let me keep going.
That's where he needed to like pivot a little bit. I mean,
let me keep. All right,
I just want to say this one thing because this jumped out to me. I was on the trivia page for this movie on IMDb, and I think it mentioned that this is the third movie he had made at that point where he has an animal who's a best friend who tragically gets murdered in a way that incentivizes the rest of the film. And you're like, that's when you're fucked. When the audience is like, do you notice he literally hits the same story beats? Not just that he makes himself a messianic figure or the stoic cowboy who solves everything, but it's like, and it's always that you know he's good because he has the animal and the animal dies and that manipulates us and all that shit. That's when you're just like, it was same thing with like Will Smith and 7 Pounds, where it's like, why does Will Smith keep dying for our sins? What is this weird occupation he has? And then Will Smith has to go away for 4 years.
After that 1991, in 1992, he makes The Bodyguard. It is a gigantic smash hit.
Yeah.
We rewatched that for my podcast, and it's campy.
Very campy.
But it was like I didn't have a good time watching it, but then talking about it, I was like, this movie's fun as hell to talk about. And like the songs are great.
Songs are fun.
Yeah.
It's campy. It's pretty stupid.
Huge hit.
It's a huge hit. In 1993, he makes A Perfect World with Clint Eastwood, which is not a smash hit. It did fine, but is a lovely movie.
And one of his best performances.
Yes.
So even though it's a dip in sort of his box office power, it's not as much a movie being sold on Costner.
No, because it's Costner and Eastwood are the stars. Costner's playing kind of a bad boy.
And it feels like Costner is like, you know what? I want to like work with one of my inspirations.
It really reminds me of Bradley Cooper doing Nightmare Alley.
Absolutely.
Where I think that's one of his best performances. I love him in that movie.
Interesting.
I know that I have a very minority take on that.
Yeah.
Like it's one of my favorite Del Toro's. And like, I think him doing that just to like sort of see how Del Toro works. Like Costner working with Eastwood and Eastwood's Best Picture follow-up is such a like smart career idea that like even though the movie didn't do great,
but also a movie where it feels like he's letting go of his star persona and being like, Clint, I'm an actor. Use me how you see fit. And it's one of his better performances because he's just like succumbing to the material in a good way. He's giving himself over.
Okay, I'm actually forgetting, right. He had 3 flops because, right, Wyatt Earp is also a flop. That's his 1994 film that runs into Tombstone, which is short and fun. Wyatt Earp is long and not fun.
Wyatt Earp's supposed to be popcorn, or rather, Tombstone's supposed to be popcorn. Wyatt Earp's supposed to be the big epic. And then Tombstone is like seen as more fun and also a better movie. Like it beats it in all
Tombstone
sectors.
is a better movie despite literally they fired the director, like they had crazy shit happen on set, like blah, blah, blah. It's kind of trashy. Wyatt Earp is like Larry Kasdan, passion project, Costner playing an American legend, and no one remembers it, right?
On paper, it should be the equivalent of like Affleck doing Gone Girl, where it's like, I know I should be making my fucking Best Picture follow-up, but like, come on, this is on paper. Yeah. Good material, good director. I'll obviously be very involved.
But so he's in the plane and the plane just got like hit by some flak. He'll be okay.
He'll be okay.
He makes The War also in 1994, which I've never seen.
Is that the Elijah Wood?
Yeah, where he's like a Vietnam vet who bonds with a kid.
It's okay. It's like the kind of movie. It's the kind of movie where if either Wyatt Earp or Waterworld had been a smash, it would have been like, yeah, he did a little thing. He went and did a small movie.
And
it's certainly not helping or hurting.
I think no one's holding it against him, but also there may be questioning 3 years ago, would his name alone have made that movie a hit?
Right.
If he wasn't coming off a little bit of a cold chill.
Sounds like Mr. Freeze was involved. Wait a second.
Frozen Empire?
Yeah, it sounds like Ice Ghost from that movie, whose name I've already forgotten.
Yes.
But I like to think of him as Ice Ghost.
Rakara.
Okay. In 1995, he makes Waterworld. Now, we will be covering that film on our Patreon in a couple weeks. We can get into it more then, but that film was quite expensive, not enjoyed by critics or audiences, and made little money.
And had 6 months of the press being like, get ready for this fucking disaster, where it landed basically as a prepackaged fiasco.
I think that movie has had like a bigger cultural footprint than a lot of
no question.
So yeah,
Waterworld is kind of liked now and has like the stunt show. There are things about Waterworld that still exist.
And it also was like, it performed under expectations, especially relative to it being the most expensive movie ever made at that point in time. It did not perform as badly as people remember it performing.
Or for a while, Peacock was looking at making a TV series of it. Because they did the research
very hard to get in on that. Yeah,
they did the research on it and were like, people remember what this is. And the thing about it is like Battlestar.
TV development going great.
Yeah, perfect.
It is
people remember what it is. Do they remember if they like it? I have to go. I'm closing the door.
It is like Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
Where the world has caught up to it now because climate change is front of mind.
Yeah.
That movie is about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could see, you could almost do like a fucking Waterworld prequel that's just set right now that is like, I think we're about to live in a Waterworld and that's all you need.
And that movie was filmed at the last moment, maybe, when they would have just truly shot the entire thing on water, which obviously made the production a nightmare and so expensive. And I think that's a lot of the movie's lasting values. You watch it and you're like, holy shit, this looks crazy. But today they would be like, we can film this in a tank with CGI. It makes it a lot easier to tell this type of story.
Probably true.
Yeah.
And then after
that's a huge ding on him. They call it fish talk.
Now he's in trouble. Now Mayday. In 96, he makes Tin Cup, which does just fine, but that's a really well remembered like cable fun movie.
That's a movie that like
he's reuniting with Ron Shelton.
That's
doing
a good kind of quiet rebound for him to like just kind of steer the ship back up.
I think it's one of his best performances.
Yeah. But it's like now he's at the moment where like, okay, Tin Cup has stopped you from totally hitting the ground.
Right. You're now in touch with air traffic control.
Yes.
You've stabilized an engine fire. Maybe and then the Postman is truly like you got hit with a nuclear weapon.
Right. And not only that, but it's like
there is no escape.
He makes everyone think was Dances with Wolves like a fluke or a mistake? Why are you going back to post-apocalyptic again?
After Waterworld so soon, it is a mistake, probably. Right. Yeah.
I do think that the thing that happens to him is so many things that happen to this movie are that Titanic comes out at the same time. It's the biggest movie in the world. But if Titanic had underperformed and had not become the biggest movie ever, like that movie had that Waterworld stink on it.
Of course, that could have been another.
So it would have distracted from the Postman.
Correct.
Instead, everyone was like, "This is the biggest movie ever." Kevin Costner, what
look,
you do?
Titanic is a better film than The Postman. The Postman has way hotter sex in it, though. Oh my God. Anyway, The Postman has really bad sex in it. Just FYI, is my joke that I'm making. In 1980,
Dick's so good he starts snoring.
In 1980. David Brin.
Dick's so good he starts snoring, Ben. Ben's giving me a look.
Ben did a slow thumbs up.
That's the funniest moment in the movie is when you like have Olivia Williams dripping with sweat as if she has had the most ecstatic sex of her life. And then the camera slowly tilts down and Costner is asleep. And it's like, this guy gives orgasms by accident.
He's a nighttime boy.
He's so virile.
Well talk about his sperm later.
His way to climaxes.
We'll talk about his sperm later. In 1980, David Brin, at the age of 30, writes Sundiver, his famous, debut sci-fi novel. In 1982, publishes the first part of The Postman. In 1984, he publishes The Cyclops, which is the second part, and then he, in 1985, publishes the complete novel with all 3 parts. He wrote it as an answer to post-apocalyptic books and films that revel in the idea of civilization's fall. It's a story about how much we take for granted and how much we would miss little gracious things that connect us today.
It is the part of this story that still
it is an idealistic book, right? It's not like a miserable book.
Honestly, it's a beautiful book. It is very much like this guy accidentally stumbles into feeling human again, and then he spreads that to other people. It's tremendous, especially from like, what I like about Brin is he's a hard sci-fi guy. His other series is about, traveling through space, and he's done all the math, but it's also about like humans have made dolphins our best friends. And like, it's
right. It's like, it's a world uplift. It's like everyone who has ascended scientifically was uplifted by another civilization, and humans are the first to have not done that.
We accidentally did that, and if we had not accidentally uplifted ourselves, we would have been like adopted by a different alien species. And so they all kind of hate us because we uplifted dolphins and chimps and are working on dogs, and it's kind of great.
But even decades later, you're like, we still don't really get many stories like this. Few people attempt the optimistic, post-apocalyptic.
The other one is Station 11, and that adaptation has so much in common with this adaptation, just because it's kind of like, well, this is the one lane. It's like, let's remember what makes us human in the midst of all this darkness. And that movie focuses on art, and this movie focuses on, good government.
And mail. Letters. Stamps.
Yeah.
Addresses.
Envelopes.
Uniforms.
Hats.
Floppy hats.
Floppy ass hats.
Gumption. That's the thing. What do you need to be a postman? Have gumption.
Counters with a bunch of shelves behind them. Little boxes.
I'll be with you in a minute.
I'm sorting.
Long lines.
Scales that are proprietary.
Unclear divisions of how many different lines they are.
Weird rules about sizes of envelopes. And weights? Does size matter or weight? No one knows. Not even the male people.
I think this movie would have been better if Costner was like, we've solved all the problems with the post office. You just need to use my promo code at checkout, and we'll
click on the microphone.
Oh my God! Wait, yeah, we have to have stamps.
We have to get stamps off the bench.
All right, Hollywood.
We have to.
This film comes out in 1985. Hollywood is immediately interested in adapting it. So this is a long cooking project.
Yeah.
Steve Tisch and Wendy Feinerman, who will eventually produce Forrest Gump, acquire the rights and put future Forrest Gump writer Eric Roth on the script.
Makes sense. Steve Tisch was on Shark Tank once and always brags that he's the only man to have both an Oscar and a Super Bowl ring.
And a golden raspberry. What's the Super Bowl ring?
He owns some team.
Good for him.
Or did at some point.
Yeah, it looks like the Giants. Yeah, New York Giants. So some people who were attached to this project over the years: Barry Levinson, Richard Donner, Ron Howard, Jan de Bont.
Interesting.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Actors: Tom Hanks, Michael Keaton, Robin Williams. Huh. Closed on Sunday.
Yeah.
To be clear, I'm not laughing at myself. I'm laughing at the idea of Robin doing 10 minutes of male jokes.
Yeah. But you can see how whatever energy that made him consider this project gets distributed to Jacob the Ladder instead. Like that sort of version of
Jacob the Liar. Yes.
I'm
right.
sorry.
Yeah.
Not Jacob the Ladder.
He's not a ladder.
Jacob has a ladder. He is not a ladder. And the Good Morning Vietnam thing of like, who's the guy who gives hope in the worst of times?
Bryn wrote a long, interesting post about this on his website where he was like, until Costner came on board, they kept trying to make it like more Mad Maxy, more traditional post-apocalypse where everybody kind of hates each other and wants to kill each other.
And the story is that he went to see Field of Dreams. I keep saying these fucking titles wrong. He went to see Field of Dreams with his wife and turned to her and said, that's the guy who should play the postman.
Right. I will say Eric Roth says his version of this film was more satirical and ironic, which Bryn didn't really like. He also says like it was like a 2-hour Western. It was good guys versus bad guys. The good guys win. It was not like overblown, but it was like just a sort of traditional like adventure action, future film.
Every guy you just mentioned, star and director alike, you can see the movie that they would make.
100%, especially like Tom Hanks, Ron Howard it's a very boring version of the movie possibly, but it's probably functional.
Right.
Yes.
Like Levinson Keaton makes sense. Like there are a bunch of pairings. I mean, I guess Robin Williams and Levinson would probably be the two or two.
You know what? Costner directing, Keaton starring. Like just Keaton's at a point in his career where he kind of needs something like that.
That's
Billy
like
Bob.
a dad tornado.
I mean,
just holy shit.
But you're latching onto the right thing, which is like this guy needs to be more of a cad.
I would agree. All right. So Warner Brothers eventually, the script seems dead. Then Warner Brothers hands it over to Kevin Costner. And Costner says, I like stories that raise the hairs on the back of your neck. I'm not at all afraid of those feelings. So he likes a non-cynical film. He's interested in a movie about, I'll quote him, we do want someone to take charge, and we'd like to think at the end of the day we'd put on the uniform and we would fight for something.
He is a deeply earnest artist. That is like the cornerstone of Costner.
Is what I enjoy about a lot of his work.
When it works,
and I enjoy
it is
about
his superpower.
Bits of this
and when
movie.
it doesn't work, it makes him so mockable. Because he like stands up there and just treats everything like, this used to mean something. Like everything in a Costner movie, whether he's starring, directing, or both, has the energy of this used to mean something.
He'll admit that he likes that it's a very humble guy who's nothing but a liar. He delivers mail and burns half of it just to stay alive. Like he likes that there's that sort of foolish edge to it, scoundrel edge, whatever. He turns down Air Force One, a film that could have possibly completely resurrected his career post Westworld. Like if he's in that movie, the movie's the exact same and he's doing his bullshit, it's still good. Like Ford's perfect in that movie, but like Costner be good.
That
right?
would be my note, is that I think it's still not, the Ford version of the movie would always be the most successful and most loved version of that film. That is the perfect version of that film. Costner would rebound if he were in that movie.
It's Ford and Costner have, I don't want to say Ford has the exact same energy, but they have that similar blend of like, I live in California, but I also live on a ranch, which is like this weird intersection.
I'm made of wood. I was carved out of a tree. Yeah.
You can imagine exactly like this is a guy who could take the controls of a plane. Not that Ford never actually does that in Air Force One, but nonetheless.
He does it in his life a lot.
Yes, he does. Well, and we should maybe stop. So, as you said, Bryn has said when he saw Field of Dreams, he turned to his wife and was like, that guy. Yeah. That guy makes
That's
a
the
lot
energy.
of sense. Brian Helgeland has just won an Academy Award. Or no, he's about to win an
LA
Academy
Confidential.
Award. Right,
the
he
same
wins
year.
an Academy Award this year. That's right.
Highs and lows of 97.
And Kevin Costner is basically like, this needs to be like a stirring tale of decency, heroism, and hope. They took some scenes from the novel, but they also thought up a whole lot of new ones on their own.
Kenneth Turan, in his review of this movie that ultimately comes out, describes it. He says, it's such an earnest hodgepodge that only by imagining Mad Max directed by Frank Capra can you even get an inkling of what it's like. And you have to imagine that was Costner's pitch.
Yeah.
Like, can we put more Capra in this?
That sounds good.
On paper, it should fucking work.
But it's like the same thing with Darabont making The Majestic or something, where you're just like, that can just fall on its face.
Yeah.
If you don't get it right, or if you don't capture
you will
the
look
mood.
so silly.
Right. Okay. The production of this film was fine. it's not one of those things where you're like, oh my God, the writing was on the wall. Like, everyone had a good time making it. Costner is proud of the movie. He thinks it should have even more of a fairy tale vibe. Like, he's like, I made a mistake not literally starting with Once Upon a Time.
He does interviews now where he says that's the one thing that doomed that movie. And I'm like, I don't think it's the one.
No, it is. That's it.
Right.
It'd be so funny if he did a re-edit and that's the only thing he's added.
That's basically, yeah. Because people still keep circling back to him and being like, you ready to admit that you should have cut an hour out of that thing?
And he's just like, no, I just needed one title card at the beginning saying this is a fantasy.
Which I'm like, if your movie is not able to get the audience on board with what tone it is, putting one title card at the beginning is not going to fix that.
I love that everyone's like, cut an hour, and he's like, I think it's 30 seconds too short.
Needs more text.
Oh boy. All right. So, Will Patton is cast as the villain. They'd worked together on No Way Out. Will Patton is a very reliable actor, then and now, I would say.
I love him.
He's good in the movie.
You do feel like you need someone doing like a fucking Rickman, Sheriff of Nottingham in this movie against
He's
Costner.
understated.
Right. They're
which is
similar
an interesting
energies.
choice. They are.
Which, if you're casting someone who's a little bigger, like 90s Billy Bob or Michael Keaton to play the Postman, then you can have the guy be stoic. It's what makes you realize that Costner would play that part well, is that Patton is kind of in Costner mode.
Costner being the villain, but playing it as Costner is such an interesting idea, because it is like, that's the kind of guy who corrupts people into like doing the worst shit.
And it would be seductive where you're like, does this guy have a point?
Patton is in Horizon coming up.
Yeah.
Nice to see them working together again. Will Patton's just had a great recent career where he's like popping up in like Minari and
the Halloween
Janet
movies.
Planet, the Halloween movies. Like, I love that dude.
But to your
he's the
point,
one who says, "What are you doing with a gun in space?" in Armageddon, a line I love.
Great line.
A really great question.
There at this point have been like over 7 years of entertainment journalists dining out on writing about how difficult Kevin Costner productions are. That like everyone was calling Dances with Wolves Kevin's Gate. They're calling Waterworld Fish Tar. Robin Hood had a lot of like fucking tug of war power battle stories.
Whoever came up with Fish Tar should have gotten a bonus. Whatever, like guy at Variety.
They won the Pulitzer.
They really.
They won the Nobel Prize for literature.
Yeah,
actually.
Fish Tar. But I'm saying the two biggest like shorthand flops.
Yeah. No, I know. Kevin's Gate, Fish Tar, right?
Both of them to him.
I mean,
and Robin Hood as well. And you're like, Waterworld was the only time they were wrong. They have their knives out for him because the story is always he's so stubborn. He sticks to his gun. Is he a narcissist? Is he an egomaniac? The thing's so long and out of control and like budget increasing. And then most of the time he's winning. This movie does not have that. People are worried about it. But none of the stories are like, and he's holding up production to do this.
Like, look, I mean, should he have maybe cast bigger in the villain role? Sure. Like, fine. Olivia Williams, he casts her off an audition. It's her film debut. She's a British theater actress. She's not bad in the movie.
She's not.
She's very pretty.
She's incredibly pretty.
Stunning. Yeah.
There's things about her character that don't make a lot of sense to me. But like, I'm not like, oh God, she's stinking up the joint.
But then the next two roles she does are like the two iconic ones in her two masterpieces.
Rushmore and what's the other one?
Sixth Sense.
Those are her first three films. And
yeah.
That is quite a like jump out of the
that
blocks.
She like lands in such a big flop, the kind of thing that like tends to doom someone if it's like and introducing.
Yeah, totally. It's like, right.
I love Olivia Williams. She's one of my faves, but I think what she plays best is somebody who's very warm but has an agenda. And you don't know what the agenda is. In this movie, she doesn't have any agenda. She's just pretty.
It's also fascinating that her first three movies are all about her relationship to her dead husband.
True.
All three. She's
incredible in The Ghostwriter. Like that's where I was like, she should like sniff an Oscar nom here. And I feel like there
Maps
was
to the Stars.
Chat. Oh yeah, Maps to the Stars. Normal movie.
Pop up and be good and shit.
She's great on television because television rewards someone who seems like they're like their gears are turning.
It also rewards an actress in her 40s.
Exactly. Yes.
Whereas films treat them like disgusting lepers.
But to your point, Emily, she's like an amazing close-up actress.
Yes.
And that's the thing that it feels like Costner's identifying is like you can just cut to her silently reacting to something and her face is still, but you see her thinking. and it's very effective storytelling.
Now, another actor in this film, and you might not have realized this, but he's playing himself, is Tom Petty, the musician. Now, Costner, I love this quote, says, "This movie deals with the nature of fame." You know what I mean? It's a very subtle thing. I think The Postman is actually kind of a funny movie when you watch it. There's humor wrapped all the way through it. And just dealing with a bit of the nature of fame and dealing with someone who's famous and him saying, "No, you're famous." That's all I was trying to do.
I
like the idea.
I think Costner could play the Petty part too.
That would be fun.
Be funny.
Yeah.
But as himself, that might be too insane. It's also just weird that 2.5 hours into this movie, Tom Petty appears and is like, "Hey man, you're pretty cool." And Costner's like, he doesn't say his name, but he's basically like, "You Tom Petty?"
Yes. Did you watch this, Ben?
Of course.
Did the Tom Petty moment break your brain?
I loved it.
It's so funny.
I actually think it's kind of a cool idea.
It's a good idea.
But like,
it should maybe just happen like a
post-apocalyptic-
little earlier, maybe.
It's wild. 'Cause it feels very different than the movie he's been making up until that point. And over 2 hours in, it's like, hey, one of the weird vestiges of our old world.
I don't know.
What
At
I
that
love
point,
thinking about-
it was nice to just be re-engaged a little bit.
Petty's kind of good.
What I love thinking about is the world has ended, but it's not the kind of nuclear apocalypse where like the sky is scorched, right? We seem to basically just lived in like kind of like a rural feudal society.
But like, yeah, right.
Like they
Our
don't really get into
society
it.
has crumbled without there being any like health effects or like
Everyone seems
nature
well, there
being
is the bad
disrupted.
mums. You gotta watch out for
The
them.
explanation in Bryn's novel is there's a bunch of EMPs set off.
I heard of that.
And
Right. And there's some
then-
bioweapons.
And then there's a plague, and then there's a limited nuclear exchange, and then this guy basically kicks off Civil War II, Nathan Holm, who's also referenced in the film.
holiness.
Yeah,
Right,
and so it's like his explanation is none of these would have been bad enough to wipe out humanity. All of them together knocked us back to feudalism.
Sure.
Right. But
I like
the
that.
idea that among all that, then Tom Petty's like, "Hey, so I survived. Like,
I
Was
was
he
on
on-
to go into politics.
I'm gonna have like a town, and I'll
Yeah.
be in charge of it." And I'd be like, "I want to live in Tom Petty's town. like sign me up. Like that sounds great."
How did he end up in Oregon though? Because he didn't live. So was he on tour in
He was
Portland?
Tom touring,
Petty
and
is
that's when
famously
shit
from
went down.
Florida.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Okay. Anyway, Petty says, like, "I was kind of lost at the time. My band had stopped touring. I was living alone. I needed something to do with my time. So I took off and went into Washington State in the middle of the woods somewhere. And, Kevin taught me a lot of things about how to get this or that across on the camera." He's really grateful for being in the movie. Now, then Kevin Costner presents a 3-hour film called The Postman to Warner Brothers, and it tests poorly with audiences. And so Warner Brothers is like, "Could you cut it?" And Kevin Costner says, "No."
Now we
And says, "In fact, to me, the length is perfect.
yes.
I don't know how I could have made it shorter." I know, but Kevin doesn't.
I have some pitches. I have some ideas. I have
Remove scenes. That's where I
Yes,
would start.
right.
Take them out of the
Right.
film.
I would say locate a big pair of scissors. Grab the film print with 2 hands.
Snip, 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 snip.
Hand the scissors to a different person
Yeah.
and go make some choices.
You could get 15 minutes out of this easy just by cutting down scenes where there's lingering close-ups on Kevin Costner. Like that scene where he rides down and the little boy's holding up the letter, which is like the famous thing everyone makes fun of. And then he like senses the letter and like turns around and comes back and grabs it. And some of it's in slow-mo. You could get that down to 30 seconds and it's like 3 minutes.
I think you could cut 30 minutes out of this movie, shortening
lose no
length.
story.
Yes.
Yeah.
But close-ups, lingering close-ups on many characters. Like there's 15 minutes of just him and like 15 minutes of a character who I was wildly unsurprised to find out was played by his daughter, the girl Ponytail, just has huge. I keep cutting to her because I love this person.
Like
you know when you watch,
which is cute.
it's
You're
cute.
like,
She's not bad, but like
sure.
you know when you watch a movie and you're like, the level of energy coming out of this performance relative to how much the camera is doting on them. This is someone's mother, wife, or child.
This is a low energy film, but the Dances with Wolves is similar. And why that movie works is you kind of like being in the world with him, and it's gorgeous, and like it's okay that it's not so fast moving. This movie is about an apocalyptic society and a war and a man on horseback delivering it needs energy.
It does.
I need it to move.
Well, thought experiment, right?
Rather than just like, oh, I'll get over there soon with the letters. And I'm just like, okay.
All the guys we're talking about who maybe would make a better postman, and even all the other guys that the studio had thought about at some point in time, all have more of a comedy background. All play more comedic, which especially for this kind of character who's like a liar and a faker, like any of these movies where you have the Galaxy Quest type setup of like, he's trying to bullshit his way through a situation he's not quite equipped for because there's a bit of a like assumed identity thing. I think Costner in this movie, in his default stoic state, would be more interesting if the director behind the camera had more comedy energy as well. Where you're like, there's a more gonzo version of this movie where you get like a Joe Dante, a Sam Raimi, a George Miller, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just going a lot pulpier with it. And he's sort of the integrity at the center. And then that's kind of a nice counterbalance where he stops the movie from feeling ironic. But the double down is like deadly.
A little deadly.
Can I say, though, I think we all agree we got to keep as much of Billy the donkey as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
He's not in it enough.
Yeah.
They kill him early.
I was really sad to see him go.
Let's discuss its plot.
Okay.
It's set in the year 2013. Now, I understand why Kevin Costner probably realized that would be a bad year because Barack Obama had just been reelected.
This is the joke I had saved from last night was this, of course, is a period piece about the second Obama term.
I think the book is set in 2013 as well. And Bryn updated it in 2020 and is like the depression of the late 2020s and then the riots of the early 2030s. And I'm like, great. Thanks, David Bryn. On target.
Nailing it.
I'm like, what else was happening in 2013 that we can make fun of? I'm trying to think like what are some cheap...
Birdman wins Best Picture.
That's later.
Is that 13?
That's Argo
14.
year.
God damn it.
Argo wins in 20.
No, Argo's 2012. It's 12 years of slave.
In the year 2013.
Can't make fun of that.
In the year 2013, Argo wins. So if
True.
we're just talking.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that means also in the year 2013, Birdman comes out. That's an apocalyptic event in and of
I
itself.
think that's.
No, Birdman came out in 2014.
It wins in 15?
Correct. It's
Damn it.
2013 is 12 Years a Slave.
Okay.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Gravity.
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 Inside Llewyn Davis. Francis Ha.
Okay, let's focus on things that aren't movies. What are the
Iron
other
Man
funny
3?
things that could be happening around the same time as this film?
Just Googling 2013 in news.
Yeah.
Edward Snowden.
Yeah,
Leaks
NSA
classified
NSA leaks.
Yeah.
Information.
Elon Musk is popular. Oh God! Whoa! Things are going bad.
Ben
Bitcoin
and I-
rises. Wait a second.
Ben
this
and I
is the
meet.
beginning.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's a big moment.
I probably met you too.
I think all three of us meet at
Because
that
I would have done Gethard podcast
Yes,
Ben
yes,
or something.
for
I
sure.
would have been around.
Yeah.
Oh, AV Club. You're recapping for the AV Club. That's.
I'm definitely just still doing that. Like I'm not done with.
I
it
do
yet,
think that
right?
this movie should have made jokes about that.
about
Yes.
about me
Yeah.
recapping for the AV
Okay,
Club.
important story from 2013. Toronto Mayor Rob Ford seen on video smoking crack. It's a good memory.
There you go.
I genuinely...
Everyone reacted to that in a really chill way, which is what I liked about it.
The fact that he died and then his brother also went into politics, who looks almost exactly like him. I had this like Mandela effect thing where I was like, I could have sworn the guy was dead and that his name was Rob. I thought I was misremembering. It's like, no, Doug's a new Ford.
It does kind of feel like an Andy Kaufman bit.
It's a Lego sequel.
It looks like I was recapping Black Mirror's first season, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Was that the following, which made you finally leave?
The following did not make me leave. Getting a full-time job with
No,
health
listen.
benefits is what
Listen,
made me
it was
leave.
the following.
It was
You're
the
right.
following.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember how that's about an Edgar Allan Poe murderer? People forget. Okay, so it's 2013. The world has ended, but looks pretty.
They're like small societies that all are kind of like distant and closed off from each other. They
Little
live in
frontier
information
towns.
silos. They don't know anything about the world at large. Or each
There's
other.
No internet, but there is Shakespeare. One-man Shakespeare shows being performed by an unnamed guy.
A man
Not
with no
one
name.
man.
There's a donkey.
There's a damn
There's
donkey.
a donkey.
And there's some crowd work.
Yeah.
So it's a guy doing Shakespeare, but he's kind of doing Shakespeare in this way, like, what happens next? Like, you know, like he knows a lot of it.
So here's like the moment where I realized, oh fuck, this isn't gonna work. I didn't know this was an aspect of the film, that he's not really a postman. I had always thought it was like he is this mythical, like, man who never gave up his job, and the whole movie is that he keeps on soldiering on. I didn't realize he like steals a uniform and creates a movement by accident.
I also kept thinking in this movie he read the Constitution to someone, but that's Battlefield Earth, right?
Right.
That's the one. Doesn't Battlefield Earth ends with someone like reading the Constitution dramatically and then someone else cries
like
or something?
The postman's oath to Lorenz Tate.
No, I know he does that, and that's fine.
It's great.
But I had in my head, I was like, he reads that to Will Patton and Will Patton cries? Is that a thing? Not a thing.
I love that this movie lets you know if someone's good or like kind of shitty by if they dead name Ford Lincoln Mercury or not.
Very well said. I watched.
Maybe it's a different movie. What's the movie where someone reads the Constitution?
I thought it was Battlefield Earth.
I think it is.
I watched the trailer for this movie on the Blu-ray disc before I watched the movie, just because I'm like, I want to see how they sold this. The trailer does not give up the actor aspect of it. It sets it up like he's just this mythical totemic figure, right?
Right. Okay. Right. Like there was a postman.
Right. And there's the scene where he goes to the wall and it's whoever, Daniel Van Bargen, like yelling at him and going like, who are you? And he goes like, I'm the postman. And he says it like that. And I was like, what the fuck is this line delivery in this movie that's like Costner playing the one man who can unify us? Why is he being like so off the cuff, sort of lackadaisical about it? And then I watch it and I'm like, oh, the whole thing in this movie is that he's a bullshit artist. I think Costner kind of can't lie on screen. I think there is something about Costner's like default energy being this kind of earnestness that it is very hard for him to play guy who is lying without it seeming like he is just not giving a performance energy. Right? Like it doesn't feel like the character is being insincere. It feels like he's not committing.
In the book, not to keep doing in the book,
but
the Bryn sets it up as it's the very first chapter that the postman in that book named Gordon finds this postal truck, and he realizes it's from after war had broken out, and this post officer was trying to deliver mail to sort of hold what was left of America together, and he was caught by bandits and like deliberately drove his car off the road into a forest where it wouldn't be found until it was found, and then someone could like deliver the mail for him. So in the book, the Costner character is picking up someone else's mission and is like, I'm going to continue doing this. And in the film, it's just like, well, I guess I got some letters here.
Right. It's in the book, it's set up
in the
more
film.
as
It's actually confusing that the letters are even for someone.
Right.
Right.
But you're saying in the book, it's more of a Green Lantern situation.
In the book, it's very much like, oh, he has a letter for the mayor of Bend. Well, the mayor of Bend's dead. And then he discovers I have this personal correspondence. Some of those people are still alive. And that gets like passed around.
It makes a lot more sense. But just this early chunk of the movie where you're watching him do the plays and like try to sneak off and everything, you're like, I should be having fun. And he is not pulling off playing a rake. Like, this is the kind of setup that is usually pretty fucking effective of like, you start out the movie with a guy who's like a bit of a piece of shit, but you can't deny he's charismatic. And slowly he like earns a soul and integrity. And I'm like, Costner's not having fun with this. And Silverado is him playing this kind of guy.
True.
And
that's early in his career. Obviously.
Early in his career, he's not the lead.
No.
He doesn't have to carry the story.
He's kind of
weight.
the energy guy. Yeah.
But he always cites that as like, that was the thing that transformed my career. That was the thing that broke me. It made me electric. But then from that moment on, he basically jumps over to Untouchables. And now he's the guy who's like, I have a responsibility to shepherd the story to the audience.
Even his Bull Durham energy would be stronger in this film.
Yes, and Perfect World has a little bit of it. And this, it's like, there's some part of him that won't go full kind of like unseemly, dishonest.
A thing that I think both Station 11 and Mr. Burns and Electric Play, which play in similar world, figured out is that like, you need to have multiple people in this theater troupe.
Yes.
Or if it's just like, I could, as much as I would like, it would be disastrous in a different way. The Robin Williams version of this works where he's up on stage just doing bits from like the era of television. And like the children in the audience are like, what's happening? You know,
he's just reciting shit. The other movie I kept thinking about watching this was Edge of Tomorrow, which pulls off the exact character arc this movie is trying to do and does it with a similarly totemic movie star of you started out and the guy is faking the persona that we basically know that movie star for. Then you completely dissect it. You take him as low as you possibly can. And then it is watching the guy you're used to be so steady, panic, really fucking fail and lose it for a long time. We're watching him gradually get back to the point where he does the thing you know he's good at. Feels like such an accomplishment. And if Costner was out of his comfort zone for the first half of the movie, and in the second half, you're like, holy shit, he's become Costner again. It's the magic trick of taking something we all know is a given and removing it and then making us excited to bring it back.
Yeah. I think Shakespeare is also kind of a, I don't want to say disastrous choice because it could work in the right hands, but it's the wrong choice for Costner. Absolutely. I do think on screen, stand-up comedy energy is kind of what you want from that guy.
Absolutely. No, you want Williams. You want him like doing Mr. Burns. You want him being like,
I love the idea. I mean, imagine, right? He just gets up there and does Shrek. I know that's off, but like that, right? Like that. It's like the Mr. Burns thing of right. Like you can't believe what survives.
Yes.
In our cultural memory.
And
I love the idea.
Does that with like Universal Soldier and shit.
That I wanted to get to. Exactly.
I think Shrek 5 should be Cameron Diaz, Eddie Murphy, Mike Myers somehow survive the apocalypse and they're wandering the wasteland performing Shrek, but they don't really remember it.
Do you want to be donkey one more time?
But imagine that at the beginning of this movie, the thing he's performing for the children is like Rambo.
Mm-hmm. Like Rain of Fire.
Right.
Yeah.
I love the idea of Shakespeare. I understand the romance of Shakespeare. It's like, right, it's almost like religious text where it's like hundreds of years old. The words are always remembered, blah, blah, blah. But then this movie's idea of Shakespeare is basically just someone doing like 2 lines from Henry V.
The hack,
like that's all it's got.
Like, and it's Shakespeare in the book, which makes sense because it's fun to read on the page. Sense. But like the hack that Station 11 figures out is you can do the plays from Shakespeare as long as like the characters' lives parallel them, and then they can like their arcs can intersect with the plays.
That's another insane thing in the sort of like trilogy of Dances with Wolves, The Mariner, and The Postman, all being very similar characters. Where you're like, they all have sort of assumed names, like titles that are bigger than their name, or in the case of Waterworld and Postman, you never know their real name.
John Dunbar, of course, but he does eventually get the name.
Dances
with Wolves. The biggest problem that I have watching this movie, which I just set aside, I just let it go, but it's sort of the Star Wars problem, where you're like in The Force Awakens, they're like, it was so long ago. Years ago, where you're like, wasn't that long ago. I'm like, everyone's forgotten the Jedi. I'm like, they have? That was like in the 90s, like to now,
Ghosts were pretty big in the 80s. There was a whole period in New York, and none of us talk about it any more present day that we know the afterlife exists.
This film's like, the world has ended. Tom Petty is alive.
Yeah.
And looks like Tom Petty.
Yeah. Does anyone recognize him? Only one man brave enough to recognize.
People remember. So like, it feels like Will Patton, Tom Petty, and Kevin Costner remember the past and everyone else has forgotten it or something.
I think he does sort of do the smart thing of like, there's a lot of kids here. There's a lot of teens here. There's, Ford Lincoln Mercury, obviously born after all this. And like, so he does have like these characters who don't remember things, but then, he'll come to a town. It'll be like the sheriff character in Pineview is like, I don't like your kind and I don't remember television at all.
Not to jump back.
Just like, wait, Tom Petty's alive. Did this happen 10 years ago? Like,
not to jump ahead though, but it does feel like Lorenz Tate's character should be younger as well. Like I'm watching and being like, this guy should be like 14. The movie makes more sense when it's him interacting with children. I agree with
23 when he makes this.
He's got a mustache.
Hey, look, I think Lorenz Tate was born with a mustache, but yes, just like in The Force Awakens, where Han Solo's like, it's true, all of it. And I'm like, I'm sure everyone knows that,
right?
But you just have to let it go.
I do think about how there are like people in college right now who kind of remember the Obama era, like a little bit. And I think
well, maybe
I think like 20 somethings
flipping me out.
20 somethings like remember less time than we think they do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the older you get, you remember more times. You're like, well, everybody remembers everything I remember. But
yeah, I mean, my sister's 26 now, and I'm sometimes astonished by the things that she just was like, well, I know I lived through that, but I had no cognizance of what was happening.
This is like another thing that like Station 11 does, which is like the main character lives through the apocalypse as like an 8-year-old girl. And you are like interrogating her memories. And it's just like, she kind of forgot everything because it was so traumatic. And she just like, she lost her parents, she lost everything. And now she like lives among this theater troupe, and that's her family. And that's like, that's the quality you get from that, where she kind of remembers cell phones. And then all the kids she meets are like, what's that? And she's like, yeah.
Okay. So he's an actor.
He tries to sneak away when Will Patton comes to town, who's basically this movie's Sheriff of Nottingham.
All right. This is my
General Bethlehem.
This is my screenwriter fix for this movie. The book literally starts with him finding the postman's office, or the postman's truck, and grabbing the mail, and then going about and like realizing his acting job isn't as stirring as like giving people mail, which we all agree is true. We need postmen more than actors.
Yeah.
But I think you start this movie with him finding the postal truck. You do like an abridged version of the second hour up front. Then he gets taken by the Holnists, and he's there, and they try to break his spirit. They do the Ben-Hur thing, and he's suffering in captivity. Meanwhile, the postman like thing is growing beyond him, and then he escapes. And yeah, I don't know.
The idea of the postman is not even seeded in this film until 45 minutes.
Exactly. Which I think is a mistake, as much as I enjoy the first 45 minutes.
There's stuff in it. Yeah, I think it's kind of the best directed stuff in the movie.
And it is like trying to set up this guy and who he is, and it's, the relationship he has with, and in the book, he doesn't have a relationship with the antagonist. It just becomes a thing. And I think in film, you do need to have that relationship there, but it is trickier when you start with that. And then it's like, now I'm going to introduce an entirely new premise, and you're just going to have this in the back of your brain. I think if they were intertwined, it would work a little better.
I mean, truly, until the moment when he finds the letters, I'm sitting there thinking, why isn't he talking about the fact that he used to be a postman? Like, I just, through cultural osmosis and the poster and the title, and even just rewatching the trailer right before, I'm like, but the point is that he was a postman in the old world, right? And it's not until he finds it that I go like, that's the setup of your movie? That he's taking it over? But it's just not a thing until that point. And there's basically an entire act.
I can't get, it's like trying to grab water. It's just like where they're like, no one remembers mail anymore. There's a post truck right there with mail in it from people who are alive.
The post office is perfectly intact.
And they're like, no, but mail's fucked, man. Like, there's no, I guess the idea is just the apocalypse happens so quickly and so brutally that, sure, of course, then the US postage would be gone, like all other government, but people would have still written letters that didn't get anywhere.
If they make,
it doesn't matter. I don't know why I'm even trying to figure it out.
If they make the future date of this movie 10 years later, it works 10% better, right? If in 1997 it's set in 2023,
another terrible year, to be clear. But
yeah, it's a little more believable.
Maybe just having a year is a bad idea.
I think
even though we have fun with it, of like, Blade Runner set in like 97 or whatever, it's like probably just a bad idea to do. It's
usually a mistake,
right?
Yeah,
except for 2001: A Space Odyssey, which sort of like they kind of trademarked that year. Like, good job by them.
Until Shrek came around.
That's true. Somebody. That's the movie.
Blush.
Like, they're like, I can't do it, and then someone starts singing in the audience.
Someone or somebody.
And then it's the guy from Smash Mouth. Oh wait, he's dead now.
Dead.
It's the different guy from Smash Mouth.
It's another guy from
I
Smash
brought
Mouth.
the mood down. I'm so sorry.
All right, so pretty quickly he gets picked up by General Bethlehem and his figure 8 scarred army of Holinists. And he's basically like, listen here, in my world, everything's shit, and I'm mean, and that's the rule of this society. And if I don't like you, I'll kill you.
I like being bad.
I like being in charge and, a bad guy.
Right.
This is kind of like bad guy zone.
Right. I want everything to be bad and everyone to feel bad.
He doesn't really have, I get that he's just a warlord, but he kind of lacks a philosophy beyond might is right, except that he wants to do bad painting.
He sold copy machines.
He did.
That's true.
And then now he's become powerful.
He's like an angry little middle American who, for whatever reason, got to be in charge.
But you want the feeling of your Rickman-esque, this guy is enjoying it. Which Patton's a little too stoic.
I think he's honestly giving too thoughtful a performance.
Yes, I agree.
He probably just needs to be mean and big and crazy.
I was reading a big LA Times piece from when Prince of Thieves was coming out, and everyone, I was going to say had their knives out, but really had their bows and arrows out at the movie. Because like Kevin Reynolds quit the movie like a month before it came out, and to the press was just like, I can't fucking deal with Costner anymore, even though they would proceed to work together another 2 times. And that it was what Kevin Reynolds walked off over was that the studio was worried that Costner was disappearing in the movie, and they wanted him to recut it with more lingering close-ups and remove Rickman's material because Rickman was testing so much better than Costner. And they interviewed Rickman about this, and he, in his sort of like infinite wisdom and compassion, was like, Costner is very good in this movie at doing what he needs to do. If I were in his role, I would not be fun. You know, he was like, he's got a very different responsibility in this film. He's got to carry the story weight. He's got to be a romantic lead. He's got to hold the center. I get to just fucking camp it up. That's my job, is to make this fun and silly. And you're like, that's the calculation that this movie isn't making.
I also just hate the RoboCop thing. RoboCop, obviously, it's like Directive 3 or whatever.
Sure.
You know, he has a secret directive. We'll talk.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, okay. In this, where he's like, Rule 1, I suck. Rule 2, I'm mean. Rule 3, fuck you. Rule 4, blah, blah. And he's like, Rule 7, anyone can challenge me at any time in a duel to the death. Anyone want to do it? And everyone's like, no. And he's like, great, I'm sure that won't come up again later. Rule 8, I'm the best. Like, you know.
It is a thing I will say in defense of this movie. This is another like character actor city movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
A lot of faces.
Right, where you're like, Kevin Costner first build, Olivia Williams first movie, Tom Petty gets the and. But it's a lot of like George Weiner and Daniel Van Bargen and all these people.
Although Giovanni Ribisi really went far from his usual thing here.
You cannot give that man fake teeth. That is like such an irresponsible.
It's the Ben Foster rule.
Truly.
It's the same thing.
Don't let him put dirt on his face. The second they reveal Ribisi, I'm like, who fucking signed off on this?
It was the moment where you were letting Ribisi run wild, like the late 90s.
But those, like, even Ribisi is like pretty early in his career. Sean Hannessy, Lorenz Tate was like, you know, one of the only people who really had some juice coming into this movie in that sort of way. I think, what's his name? I always get his name wrong. But there's the guy who Costner fights in the Wholeness Troupe, who's got a 3-part name, who's a really good character
Brian
actor.
Anthony Wilson.
Thank
Great
you.
actor, does a lot of like cop shows and cool stuff. This is like one of his first movies.
I was watching this thinking, if this were made tomorrow, every character with more than 5 lines would be played by someone with an Oscar nomination. And like the analog project I was thinking of comparing this to, which I know you played in Cinematrix recently, and it made me think about this.
Please tell me.
Olympus Has Fallen
Sure.
is a movie where you're like, this is the most overqualified cast in the world. And I'm not complaining about it, but it's got like
complain.
6 Academy Award nominees in it. And you're like, isn't this putting character actors out of work?
Angela Bassett, Ashley Judd, Melissa Leo, Dylan McDermott, Rhoda Mitchell. Like, yeah, it's true. A lot of big names in it. Lawrence O'Donnell.
But like, you have big people who show up for like 10 lines, and you're like, I guess if you can get Angela Bassett, why not get her? But also there used to be an entire functioning economy of certain guys. I mean, Daniel Van Bargen, who had a very tragic end to his life, but was an incredible.
This is the moment where he's everywhere, right? Yeah. Malcolm in the Middle is right after this. Come on, let's shout out Von Bargen.
Yes, sorry. Seinfeld. We've weirdly covered him like 5 or 6 times in different miniseries, because he's in Silence of the Lambs.
True.
And in Philadelphia.
He's got a big Demi career. He's got Demi seems like his kind, like it seems like they vibed.
But it was interesting to see the different directors. Basic Instinct, Silence of the Lambs, Philadelphia, Amistad, The Postman, and then Shaft. Singleton Shaft. But he's in The Majestic.
Do you
he's
think
in No Brother Where
tell
Art Thou?
Shaft what to do in that?
Yeah, and you know what Shaft told him to do?
What? And you know what Shaft told him to do in the later movie? Stop being such a whiny millennial ordering salad or whatever he does in that movie.
Yeah.
Right?
I bet you shoot people through an app or whatever the fucking... That movie is so bad. It's astonishing.
Yeah, he was like one of the, 90s TV was so good for these guys, would come in and do 1 or 2 episodes and just be like, he's in an amazing X-Files. He's amazing in the X-Files. It's not a great episode.
He's only in 4 episodes of Seinfeld, and you ask people and they would assume he was on 3 seasons.
That's kind of like the Bryan Cranston thing too, right? Whereas if you played a guy who popped on Seinfeld, everyone was like, you're that guy from Seinfeld. He's only in 15 episodes and 3 seasons of Malcolm in the Middle. I think of him as part of the regular cast.
Exactly.
I know it's just the first couple seasons, right? When the guys it's so weird that that's a part of Malcolm in the Middle. Like, how is that? Like, remember, the oldest brother is in what?
I was going to say, remind me.
So,
I
Malcolm
watched
in the Middle,
that show, but
the premise of the show, there's
recall.
4 brothers, right?
Sure.
You got the parents, right? And then it's like the oldest brother is in military school for being naughty. And like, there's always a B plot with him in the military school being like wacky that never links up with the show.
You know the answer to this.
What is it? It's the other Masterson, Danny's brother.
Because they were worried about having their main cast have 3 underage actors who couldn't work adult hours on a single camera that was going to have like difficult shoots on a stylized show.
I guess it's just weird that he's not with them.
Well, but they were like, it's better if that can be its own fucking unit, because even the parents are always going to have to relate back to the kids. Get one adult actor who's off in his own space.
You know, I know what you're saying practically. Do you think that's the answer, Emily?
I do. Like,
I know that.
That sounds correct from what I've heard. And like, I do think like they continue doing that. Like, even after he leaves military school, he like
goes somewhere else.
Goes to the oil fields and gets married.
The later versions of his story were boring. Like, the military academy was good, and Daniel von Bargen was like
it was mostly because of Daniel von Bargen. But like, he was only in military academy for the first 3 seasons. Daniel von Bargen is only in 15 of those episodes. The first 3 seasons of Malcolm in the Middle were 50 episodes, basically.
Right. Malcolm in the Middle is one of those shows that in its second season, it was so hot
to 60.
that they had 25 episodes, which must have literally been illegal. Like the way they treated those children on that show.
But his impression was so big, you're like, every episode has a plot line where he's yelling at Masterson.
That's like a great show, right?
It's like
if I throw that on today, I'd like it.
It's aged absurdly well. Right. It feels like one of the few shows that's interested in class in America.
Right. That's what I liked about it at the time. Yeah. Right. It was actually about a real family, like that had economic problems, but not like exaggerated ones.
Kind of runs out of steam, but it ran 7 seasons, so of course it does. And what I like about it is it's like Frankie Muniz is smart enough to like escape this family, but then he becomes a little asshole because he's like the one that can go off and join the upper class.
Special little guy.
He would do this a lot.
David's doing the face and he's nailing it. George Weiner, who's the guy who plays fucking Colonel Sanders in Spaceballs, who's like a very recognizable comedy character actor, was like a vet, like sitcom guest star in the 70s. In this movie, he's like bald and he's got like facial scruff and a big nose. And you just look at him and you're like, I've seen this guy in like a million sitcoms.
This guy. You know that guy. He's a guy. Yeah.
And he's one of the guys in one of the towns.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Everyone in the towns, I'm not going to say they're good, but like they're doing their job.
Peggy Lipton.
Yeah, Peggy Lipton.
Who's the guy with got his tongue cut off? He's like the sidekick to the general.
I know who you're talking. Is that Scott Bairstow?
I think so. Who also
Sean Hatsoy?
His life went in bad directions.
Oh, did it?
Scott Bairstow? Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying this.
No good. Very bad. Don't do it. Yeah, I think that is him.
Right. Yeah, I think that's Scott Bairstow. Right. Luke, the one who's Scott Bairstow is the one who's going to shoot the postman at a certain point, and Costner's like, "You're not going to do that. See you later." And and then he like comes over to the other side.
Would you shoot a letter? I bet you wouldn't run a bullet through a stamp.
But I mean, like, even like...
I got David good on that one.
I just love that it's about mail.
I do too. It's the thing I like most about it, and it's when the movie works for me.
It takes too long for the movie to get to the mail, if anything.
I was watching this and being like, I bet David has like post office feelings.
Okay,
like,
actually, can I speak on this for a second?
Please.
I think I may have said this before, but in the first grade, my first grade teacher, Starrett Pearson, shout out, great teacher. We did this thing where our class was a post office in the school for a whole week. We made stamps, so it was like arts and craftsy, and we had envelopes, and you could come to our classroom if you were any other kid in the school and write a letter and we would give you a stamp for 1 cent and an envelope for 2 cents.
My elementary school did the exact same.
It's such a good idea.
It's a great idea.
And then we had people all had roles. Like you make the stamps, you sell the letter.
Yeah.
And there were kids who were mail carriers, and they would take the letter anywhere in the school, and this was like allowed.
At my
like
school,
so I could go into any other room and be like, I have a letter for this person, and I was allowed to like deliver it to them.
We voted on what to name our mail service, or like what the mascot would be, and I think we had just read Dr. Dolittle as a class, so it was the push me pull you mail.
Okay,
which I will never forget. Was just very bizarre. Of like
take another pass, but sure.
But it's like, imagine telling that to a bunch of 6-year-olds who had just learned there's an animal with no butt and 2 heads, and they were like, push me pull you.
And like I remember it so vividly and fondly. And so yes, and it was like this, where it was just like, it's fun to write letters and send mail, but not in that boring way where you go to the office and it's your taxes. In the fun way.
My grandma would write me a letter almost like every other week throughout my childhood.
Yeah,
because she was like, from an era when you did that. There's even now, my dad collected all these letters between her and my grandfather when he was in World War II. That's just like amazing. It's just incredible that was how people corresponded with one another at one time.
My grandmother was a huge letter writer, and I have too few of her letters to me. I wish I'd kept more of them, but like her kids are all trying to sort of keep this alive. And it's like, it is this thing where I'm always like, I should really write more letters. But
we all should.
Instead,
we're sending TikToks.
But the thing is, when they
to China,
when they were doing those letters, they were casual. They were like, "What's up?"
Yeah.
I did this day. I ate roast beef today. Anyway, let me know how you're doing. Like, they weren't prolific,
Costner grabbing this letter in slow motion on his horse. His grandma needs to know.
It was a thing in my life that very quickly became very annoying, but for like a period of time felt like it gave me some Costner-esque sense of like purpose and like focus and discipline. But like very early in the pandemic, my whole family moved out of New York other than me.
Yes.
Very like suddenly.
Yeah, they moved to, right.
And then started to scatter. And everyone in the family's mail got sent to me because people didn't have permanent addresses. Everyone made mail forwarding my apartment because they were like, well, you're staying put, right? And I would have to like once a week aggregate all the family mail and send it to everyone else in manila envelopes. But I did kind of like the ritual of going to the fucking post office once a week. And partly it was because my life was hell.
Right. You needed things to do.
But I'd walk through with the gloves and mask on, and I'd feel like fucking the cause.
Did you inspire a movement?
I did.
Did you pull America back together again?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
You did a great job.
You remember, it was all over the news. And then Louis DeJoy said, we're shutting him down. This kid Newman's giving people too much hope. Mailing junk mail to his dad.
Okay, so in The Postman, after he's with Will Patton for a while, it's sort of a weird story choice to start with this, but I guess it makes sense.
To Emily's point, it's kind of a bad structural choice.
I do like the scene of them watching Universal Soldier and being like, no! And then he's like, fine. And they put on the Sound of Music and they're just like playing it on rocks.
Yeah.
Like they're just projecting it onto like, it's so cool.
Bad structural choice, but it is interesting that it very much is out of, and you name check this already, like the Spartacus playbook. It's the Gladiator playbook, right? It's like these sort of slavery epics are what they're kind of riffing on.
This is when I'm like, this movie might be kind of good. Like, this is interesting.
I do feel like if my two options were Sound of Music and Universal Soldier, I'd want to watch Universal Soldier like once every few days,
Back to back,
sometimes,
man.
But also like if you live in this world,
right? Maybe it's a little too close to home.
Yeah, I couldn't find any corroboration of this, but rumors abound on the internet that people on set during the production of this movie would jokingly refer to it as Dirt World, and Costner would fire anyone he heard saying that because he was.
Did you say dirt? No, this is nothing like Waterworld.
Like their joke was he's doing opposite Waterworld.
Yeah.
Dirt World is a good name in and of itself.
Kind of is the moves you would make if you were handed two back-to-back $200 million checks, where you'd be like, first one's going to be wet, and the next one,
dry, baby. Let me just say this. I would love to host a screening in a quarry. I don't know how to make that happen.
You better get some comfortable seats because this movie ain't short, and I'm not sitting on rocks.
No, not this movie. Any other movie.
You've been advocating for underwater film exhibition.
You have. Yes.
It was just one of my ideas, Emily, of how to advance cinema.
Okay.
Keep people going.
Right. You know, you didn't have
Absolutely.
answers on how people would hear the movie or survive watching
I
it.
did. I said it would be broadcast into their helmets, their tank.
It would be great if you invented like the bubble city that we've seen in sci-fi, like under the ocean, and you're just like, what's down there? People live down there? You're like, no, it's an Alamo Draft House.
You want some chicken wings?
The pizza's okay.
Yeah, right. It's frozen, but you know, pretty decent frozen.
But Rock Theater must have excited you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rock Theater's
Didn't
cool.
excite everyone here.
No, I was
Come
into it.
on.
I was like, this is kind of
That was fun.
humorous.
Yeah.
And like, this is fun dystopian stuff. I like this. Then he escapes and sleeps in a postal truck and discovers a bag of mail, and then moves on to another settlement, Pineview, and basically bullshits his way in by being like, I'm a postman and I have letters for
But
people.
he does it with the amount of commitment you just did it with. The moment
That's true.
you've set this guy up to be an actor, this like kind of like attention whore, right? Who just loves like everyone looking at him and him having fun and like
He's
fucking
not being goofy or slick enough. You're right.
and he's also not like selling it hard enough where this should be a moment where the story clicks and you're like, this actor who lives in a world where theater basically no longer exists has now landed upon the greatest role of his life,
You want
which is playing hero.
the Robin Williams or Michael Keaton in that role is like that scene is like it escalates and like the guy's gonna pull a gun on him and he's gonna shoot him and he stops doing jokes and just frantically grabs letters and is like, I got one for Peggy, I got one, and
I
that
just kept thinking about Tim Allen in Galaxy Quest, who nails this so fucking hard of like, you're watching him be sort of like a washed up idiot. And then when he gets on the ship and they take him seriously, he's like, I'm back to being serious.
Mhm.
I'm like fucking savoring the fact that people look at me as some sort of like heroic figure.
Now, Daniel von Bargen is playing a guy who basically is right. Like, I'm here to shoot like people on site if they try to come in. But really, if he says male, I don't want to hope. I don't want to hope. But the one thing I kind of would love there to be is a postman.
But he also, for like,
But he's like, are you really a postman?
Yeah.
Like, don't fuck me around. It's like a guy who's been on too many bad dates or something.
for like 5 or 10 minutes.
You're not lying to me, right?
For 5 or 10 minutes, he's treating him like Woody treats Buzz Lightyear, where he's like,
Right.
guys, he's not a real space ranger.
Right.
He
yes,
keeps saying it
truly.
to everyone where he's like, he's not a
There's no
mailman.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And everyone else is like, but we believe in him.
he's
And then right at the moment, like 10 minutes in, he's like, you know what? I actually believe in you more than anyone else. He turns
I swear to
so
God,
fast.
He does.
back before the apocalypse, he had the complete Topps card set of all the mailmen
The
in
greatest
America, and he had
American mailmen.
all of them memorized. He's
He
like,
had the
you're not
plate
one of them.
series. Yeah.
Rin Tin Tin.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's like, fuck you. No one fall for his bullshit.
Anyway, I have a letter for you. If you want it, please take it, please. Thank you.
Costner starts to ride out of town and he's like, let me just ask you one last time. Are you a real man? And Costner shrugs and he's like, good enough for me.
God damn it.
Single tear rolls down his cheeks. You're the best man I ever met.
Also in this town, he meets a teenager named Ford Lincoln Mercury, who's like, I love your vibe. Can I be a postman too? And Costner's like, huh? And he's like, I'll take that as a start a giant system of postmen. Cool.
But much like the Rock Theater, you're like, this is kind of fun post-apocalyptic
Right.
stuff. Like, what do we make of the remnants of our old society?
Now, he also meets a couple who basically are like, saw you across the bar and liked your sperm vibe. They basically like, hi, how you doing? Here, you're a mailman. How's the sperm?
Couldn't help but notice your balls are huge.
You think you could fire 6 rounds into me right now? Because my husband, nice guy, the mumps took his sperm.
Right,
And
so
we need sperm now.
they
You'll
set
just
it
be
up.
the body father.
They set it up like her husband is just this sort of like nice sort of cup.
Yeah, sure.
He's-
Yeah.
He is played by Charles Eston, who is one of my favorite like TV bit actors.
But I know him by a different name.
Chip.
When he was one of the main guys on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right.
I was like,
Fantastic.
why does this guy look so familiar? He was the white guy who would do the songs along with Wayne Brady. Where if Chip and Wayne were on the same episode, you were like, fuck, they're gonna do a lot of musical games this one.
Right.
The lane that he found on television was he either is like, hey, you want to sleep with my wife? Or he's like, you're someone else's wife and I want to sleep with you. Like, those are the two guys he plays.
And you're just like, oh, this movie, it's like he's sort of like the well-intentioned but sad sack, like boyish guy who can't impregnate his wife. Then he's going to die tragically as a sacrifice. And she's going to like have such a hard time processing his death that it will take her the entire movie to fully fall in love with Kevin Costner. Instead, to jump ahead, the moment he dies, she's like, I just remembered that he's a piece of shit. Suddenly, I just remembered that he was an abusive monster.
Another screenwriting.
He's not giving you that energy on screen.
Another screenwriting thing I thought is
guileless.
Collapse the Lorenz Tate character and the Chip Aston character into one guy. And he's married.
Interesting.
Married to Abby and also like helping start up the post office. And then he's like and like, I think this movie's better if Abby and the postman never become a thing. They just kind of quietly long.
There is
not to spoil, but he impregnates her with his, mega seed.
They offer
his male seed.
They go like, would you mind?
He puts a bunch of stamps on that cum, is all I'm saying.
Right. Would you mind being my body father?
Right.
And he's like, this is too much for me. He goes to sleep in his tent. He is like, man, I can't believe I sold everyone this Postman bullshit. She shows up and she's like circling back on my offer. And he's like, you know what? Let's fuck.
Right. Let's fuck. I'll put 5% of my like effort into it. Right.
He starts going like full Costner romance on her. And she's like, don't compliment me.
Right.
Don't kiss me.
Get it in there.
Close my eyes. And then he's like, cool. Hunk shoe. She rides him like a mechanical bull. And then walks away and is like, yeah, I'm feeling really pregnant. Like, it's one of those movies.
This is where
like immediately
I'm like rewinding, being like, I must have missed something. I'm sure this is when audiences are like, can the knob go lower? Like, I've lost interest in this film.
You read reviews from the time, and a lot of people are like, this movie is somehow 3 hours interminable, and it feels like there are long sections missing. It makes weird jumps where you're like, I'm sorry, you spent 20 minutes on that, but you're also going to jump straight from this point to that point?
So it's like Costner's being like, look, he's an ordinary guy. He resurrects Earth through mail. Also, people beg him for his cum. Where you're just like, can you maybe take an ego pill, buddy? Like, I swear to
Chip
God.
Aston on his knees. Buddy, I'm begging you to give my wife some of your cum.
Fuck my wife.
Well, I kept thinking of that song, Please, Mr. Postman, Will You Cuck My Wife?
So, okay. General Bethlehem gets word that, yes, there's a rabble-rousing postman going around and is like,
shooting loads left and right.
Let's go to every town and be like, do you like mail? Oh, I think it's okay. Decapitate this man.
But at this point, this
is an R-rated film, to be clear.
He has sold this town on the idea of postmanning so hard that they're like, well, we have letters for you. Can you go deliver them? So now he's like wandering, like traveler man with no name.
Town to town.
Right. I'm going off.
Right.
Smell you later.
I love how they keep asking him what he's going to do next. And he's like, over there. Go that way.
I gotta
Astonishing how bad this character is at lying.
It literally is like he's like looking around, then there's a sign that says west, and he goes, west?
Yeah. This guy can't fucking sell the thing?
Oh, God. But people are so bored in this shitty world, right? Anyway, that they're just like, I don't know, I guess I'll put all my eggs in the mailman bag.
And also, he'll put all his cum in my eggs.
That was good.
Thank you.
That was good.
Ben and I are pointing at
I
each
knew
other.
this would be a good episode. I just knew when I was watching this movie.
That to us yesterday.
I was like, this is not K-19 the Widowmaker. I'm not.
Be a good episode.
What were you going to say, Emily?
Symbolically speaking, like, the post office is a great choice for this movie.
Unbelievable! Of course! It's so cool!
But like,
so is his cum!
Yeah.
Well.
Go on, Emily. Apologies.
They should have cut like to a little like shot of his sperm with like little mail carrier hats.
They should have done the Spike Lee. Oh, with carrier hats.
He delivers.
Not rain nor sleet.
His face superimposed She Hate Me style, wearing the little hat on each spermazoa.
Or looking like Mr. Zip or whatever the post mascot was.
Yeah, this movie should have more Mr. Zip in it.
They should have done the Look Who's Talking thing where like her unborn child has Bruce Willis's voice, just occasionally offering
I
commentary.
was thinking watching this that Bruce would also do this better.
Yeah, he'd do this better. Again, it kind of needs to be a different movie, but yes. Like, okay, so Bethlehem basically goes on like a reign of terror. He kills Olivia Williams' cuck husband.
Right. Well,
sorry for calling him a cuck. He literally participates in this. It's fine.
Will Patton is like, man, I'd love to put my cum in that woman. And he's like, hey, pal, that's my wife. Only men I give permission to get to come inside of her. And Will Patton's like, well, in that case, you're fucking dead. Murders him.
You know how famously there's a lot of like couples on dating apps who are looking for a bisexual woman to come and like sleep with both of them? I think that my wife and I should get on a dating app and be like, we're just looking for a body father.
We're looking for a body father.
A body father.
Your classic
preferably
Kevin Costner type.
US Postal.
Body father is such a good
If
term.
not, at least pretend to be. And please do an okay job pretending to be a postman, okay? Don't just be like, yeah, stamps. Oh, envelopes. Mail goes in those.
I agree with you that the movie as it exists, he and Olivia Williams should never actually fall in love. But there is an interesting idea on paper to a setup like this, where basically at the beginning of their relationship, they sleep together and she gets pregnant. And then the movie is them not actually falling in love until 2 hours later. Like the reverse.
I understand
courtship.
that in this movie they fall in love. Do they fall in love?
No.
They barely seem to like each other.
No.
The middle of the movie is after
You're
this.
so beautiful.
Right. After this, like, you know, Bethlehem Scorched Earth campaign happens, like the postman, by the way, we never know his name. He is the postman.
Yeah.
And Abby escape to a cabin and kind of chill there for the winter.
And now
we
they're
need
partnered.
this time jump so that when he returns to like the world,
Yes.
postal
Things have
services
changed.
are just back up and
Right.
better than ever.
She's somehow proficient in using an assault rifle.
Everything.
Immediately.
She's good at everything.
Yeah.
It's clearly he could, you know, Costner clearly is like, this is the next like Mary McDonnell thing. Like I need this kind of like sort of this lady who will seem like outdoorsy and flinty and like cool. And she's fine at all that. But you're kind of like, what is this? Like,
Once again, he's
what's this movie
replicating
about?
his beats. Like it's
Right.
like, God, the fucking Costner movie has basically become its own set of storytelling tropes.
Yeah. What's weird about this is that the Bryn book ends with a scene where the way they overcome the warlord is they band together with the Umpqua, an indigenous tribe that's native to that area. But also, like, they're like, well, you are the white man who needs to lead us into battle. Like, we're so glad you're here. Thank you so much.
The Dances with Wolves
and
setup.
and Costner, like, is just, I don't know if he never read the book or whatever, but and, like, that would have been a disastrous choice to do that again. But it's in the book, which is weird.
And for how much he's replaying in other areas his same moves over and over again.
Yeah, I think he's leaning on his moves a little too much, even though Costner will be the one telling you, like, no, I feel like I made like a funnier, kind of odder film. And like, yes, you did.
Yeah,
like
by
Dances with
comparison,
Wolves much more serious.
Yes.
No question about that. But like, although Dances with Wolves has a little humor in it,
But
but
did
like,
not go far enough in either direction.
right, exactly. But it's still just, it has too much of your set dressing on it. Right. Yeah. Anyway, so they hang out for a while. They fall in love, or they don't. I don't even care. But when the point is, when he gets back, there's like a girl on a horse, and he's like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "I'm in the fucking U.S. Postal Office." Duh.
Yeah.
Like everyone loves mail now.
Right. That's played by his daughter. The
Yes.
character's name is Ponytail.
I do love that he's made up a government based in the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in
I do
Minneapolis.
too. One of those things again, though, where
Stuff.
he's just like, the Vikings used to play there, and I'm like, okay. So they both know the Minnesota Vikings. So the NFL existed within the last 20 years. Like, what happened here, buddy?
Right. It feels like it needs to be less than 5 characters who are over the age of 40 in this entire movie.
Is that his best improv, though? That Will Patton's like, I saw the White House burn, which also insane that he says that. And he's like, well, smart ass, it's in the Metrodome now, okay? Like, where it's just like, he's just clearly thinking of like a place.
We forgot to mention
that's big.
that another one of his very convincing lies is that the current president is Richard Starkey, of course, the real name of Ringo Starr.
Mhm.
And then he says that his catchphrase is things,
Peace and love, peace and love.
but he
I know he doesn't
misquotes it, right?
Right. I can't.
He rewords it.
Yeah.
It's like all you need is mail.
He says like it's getting better very often.
Yeah.
Like something like that. They repeat it back to him.
Things are getting better every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's every day instead of all the time. Yeah.
So now Postal Service is happening everywhere. Like Bethlehem's Men capture a postman from California. This movie's set in Utah. I don't think we said that. So like that's how far it's gone. And suddenly there's like a whole operation. But then the postman realizes that these young postmen are being terrorized by Bethlehem's Men. So he's like, I'll do it all myself. Give me that mail. I'll be back in a minute. You know, right? Like he's being heroic and self-sacrificing.
Yeah, and it's your classic, like, this idea is dangerous. I need to snuff it out. We cannot let people believe in something.
He's refusing the call. More than 2 hours into a movie. I need to go home, Kevin. He's like, maybe we shouldn't be postmen. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the cat's out of the bag.
Also, you're watching this at home and you're like, I don't know, I need to go into a different room or something.
Yeah, I need to go somewhere.
What's so fucking weird is when he does that, I like looked at the running time and was like, there's only 40 minutes left. Like, it's like then the last 45 minutes of this movie are just absurdly compressed.
This movie is horribly structured. That's the thing.
Horribly hard. It doesn't make any sense how this has developed.
No, the division of time across different story elements is wrong in almost every area.
Like I'm trying to like what else happens? Nothing. I mean, like then there's a big battle.
They go to Tom Petty.
Tom Petty. That's the thing I'm forgetting. Right.
But like, Lorenz Tate has formalized the entire idea of what he is. He has become a nationwide folk hero, but it's also the idea of like these tribes are talking to each other now. They're sort of just like,
exactly.
People are no longer in the dark.
It means that someone like Will Patton is losing his power. Like, and then people are like, well, I heard the postman's 50 feet tall and breathes fire or whatever. Like, whenever he goes to a new town.
Making Bill Brasky jokes about the postman.
Right.
Yeah.
And, whatever. They go to see Tom Petty. You're famous, right? You're famous, man.
I saw Tin Cup. I thought it was pretty good.
The villain was called David Sims.
Spelled differently.
Two M's, which is more common. I bet the film critic with that name gets that a lot. Even from people who email him. His email says his name and it has one M in it.
I thought it was more of a TV critic. Doesn't he do recaps in this year,
2013?
It's 2013.
Oh, it's a good point. Does he get the award for the most clueless reviewer from the commenters every year, or is it just named after him?
How many eyes do you put in Sims?
Making you do Seinfeld was truly... It was life-changing.
Yeah. And then you did Gilmore Girls.
No, I may have talked about it before, but I was fighting to do Gilmore Girls for years.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I also did The Simpsons for a while,
Right,
which
that
is
was
like
the one
a
I feel like
rolling
you've talked about.
classics that we had going. I jumped on for a season or two. Was there any other classics that I did?
I think I think it was just Simpsons, Seinfeld, and Gilmore.
Then I'm like, please. I truly had to sell them on Gilmore Girls. Like, where they're like, I don't know if our audience like cares enough about that, which is so crazy to think about now. Like, now Gilmore Girls is like this totemic rewatch show.
And it was huge. It was huge for us traffic wise. And I feel like it was a lot of people who were like, why don't you just say this is good? And like you were saying this is good.
Yes. I am rude about the second season finale of Gilmore Girls. And I remember them being really mad at me. But I do think season 2 of Gilmore Girls is overrated. But Gilmore Girls is still one of the 10 best TV shows of all time.
Folks,
I'm a big 3 and 4 guy.
Weird blank check news. And this will timestamp this episode very directly. Park Chan-wook to remake Old Boy in English language for television.
I saw that.
As series.
I'm out on it. No.
I mean, I just don't think it's necessary.
I also don't think it'll happen.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these things get announced like that fucking Parasite show.
Yes.
And I'm like, this is never going to happen. This is a meeting.
It's just weird that he's doing it himself in theory.
I want to timestamp this even more. I just got to ask David, Bluey finale. Thoughts?
Okay, so I don't think it's
the season finale.
It's the season finale. Although actually there is another episode.
Called
Surprise after the sign, which we'll post next week.
How appropriate.
Indeed. I believe they split up these 3 episodes because, the episode before the sign, which is called Ghost Basket, which my daughter is obsessed with, loves when Bingo goes in the Ghost Basket, ends with the reveal of the house for sale sign. And I guess they didn't want to reveal that. And then this, I assume, deals with the aftermath of them not selling the house. Spoiler alert for Bluey. They don't sell the house. I thought it was beautiful.
Serious? What do you mean?
People are really intense about Bluey. Not you. Like I said, like people out there are crazy about Bluey.
I think if Ben watched
to be clear,
Bluey,
I am too.
If Ben watched Bluey, he would become like the most intense about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to eventually watch Bluey and you're going to dig it. Like everyone will eventually watch Bluey.
It's a show about a dog being a good dad, right?
It's a show.
Not to reduce it, but that's something that is going to hit Ben in the feels.
That's an aspect of Bluey.
Right?
Bluey is, I would say, Bluey is a show about imaginative play. Like that is what Bluey is about.
Okay.
Like 90% of Bluey is about a game that's being played with this family, right? Like the kids play a game and the parents get involved and sometimes other people get involved.
Right. Like pretend I'm a postman.
I mean, honestly,
I think they did that.
They might have. I think they definitely have like a male. Anyway, the sign is obviously them. Like the thing with Bluey to me is like season 3, and I don't know if you agree with me, is so ambitious in its storytelling.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Not just the sign, which is this extra big long episode they did, but just the way they like the episode where they roll the credits 3 minutes in. And because the teacher's like, well, I guess you haven't learned a lesson. Like, and then they start rolling the credits, and then the kid's like, well, I don't know. And then they undo the, things like that. The episode that ends with Bluey being drawn in the episode where that's about Bluey learning control, like shit, like where you're just like, they are really going for stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want to never do Bluey again, that's not going to happen because it makes $1 billion, but they can walk off. And I assume some sort of zombie Bluey can exist. But I'm like, do more. You're only doing more interesting things.
I genuinely think they should add some young kid characters and just keep Bluey and Bingo growing up. I think I agree. Like the neighborhood should become more of a character. But season 3 is trending in that direction. I have heard you talk about Bluey with so many guests, and they're like, I don't watch that, and I wanted to give you a chance.
Bluey's so good. I mean, I could talk about the problem with Bluey is that I could talk too much. I
do keep telling people it's the best written show on TV.
It is.
I genuinely think that.
It's Griff. You should check it out. It's so good. The thing with Bluey is that I've seen it so much that it's kind of sick. It's like drugs.
Sure.
Where it's like, there's nothing wrong with me watching this much Bluey, but like, it's a little crazy how much I've seen Bluey. Like, I've seen certain episodes just dozens and dozens of times. Like, Emily Yoshida was staying with us when, she was on this podcast, and she stayed with me for a week. And she watched a bunch of Bluey with us, because if you're going to be in my house these days, you're going to watch some Bluey. And like, we're watching Stickbird, great episode. And like, there's this line delivery where Bingo's like mad at some kids. And she's like, why'd they do that? They're mean. And the dad's like, they didn't mean to. Like, they didn't know. Like, they took her Stickbird. And she's like, they're my rivals. And I'm just like, that line delivery is so funny. Like, it's such a funny word for a kid to say, rivals, rather than enemies or whatever she means to say. And I was like, Emily, check it out. She's going to. And then I'm like laughing at the line delivery. And Emily's like, you've lost your mind.
It's a show about imaginative play, but it's also quietly stealth. A show about realizing your parents are people with disappointments, and like
that's
and it's like
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's also a show about how parents make fun of their kids in the gentle, fun ways, and like kids make fun of their parent. Like, it just understands shit, man. It's so good.
And the creator's super hot. I discovered this.
He's a babe. Joe Brum.
Looks like Ken Burns as a rhythm guitarist for a grunge band.
With a better haircut?
Yeah, with a much better haircut.
But similar, like where you're like, Ken, let someone at your hair. Like, we can do more with this.
Peace and love, man. Peace and love.
Anyway, why did we get on Bluey?
we're timestamping the episode. I just wanted to know your thoughts. I've been curious, and I thought I'd do it on microphone.
I was
instead of
so
texting
invested in this song. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was wonderful. I knew where it was going with the coin, but I thought it was
beautiful television.
Beautiful, and I do think that the moral of the sign, which is basically telling kids like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and that's okay. Like, is profound.
Its sense of
not in a not pretentious way.
Its sense of Rube Goldbergian storytelling, where everything affects everything else, is much better than the Postman's sense of that. And I brought it back. I did it.
Yeah, the Postman. Well, it does, of course, end with, for whatever reason, the Postal Service gathers a line of troops. Bethlehem gathers a line of troops.
Yes. It's a civil war where there are basically two sides, and one side is the postman, right, and the other side is people.
The other side is random other guys who have 8s on them. They're just standing there, and it's like, what's going to happen? And then Kevin Costner's like, I invoke Rule 7. I challenge you. And Will Penn's like, you're not a holiness. He's like, yes, I am. Here's my brand.
I was hoping you'd forget about that.
Somehow he's forgotten.
I established that 2.5 hours ago. Why do you think this movie's so
long ago? How does Will Patton not recognize Kevin Costner?
Wild.
Whatever.
It's wild that
he shaved.
Recognize
he shaved.
He's shaved. It's like Clark Kent putting on glasses or
I
whatever.
was say he looks better with the beard.
Yeah, I think so.
An
He looks better with the
unbelievably
beard.
handsome man, but he looks good with the beard in this movie.
And it fits the aesthetic of the movie.
I think that it is kind of smart to have this end as one guy versus one guy. I think that the fight choreography leaves something to be desired.
Yeah, them just wrestling in the dirt's a little underwhelming. And then this kind of extended, like, I'm not going to kill you. Male is better than murder. And then Lorenz State's going to do it. And then doesn't do it. And then like Will Patton's like, aha, I will kill you. And then fucking the other guy shoots him. And you're like, okay. And then Kevin Costner's like, we're going to have new rules. No murder. Male. And I was like, yay. And then just cut to 30 years later, life is completely normal again. Yes. Cities look normal. People are wearing Land's End clothing. Like, it's just like, we're back to normal.
We've reestablished Patagonia.
Yes. Salutes a statue of the Postman.
They have a statue. It's his daughter. Yeah. Mary Stuart Masterson in an uncredited performance. I love to think about like later Olivia Williams being like, yeah, your dad was a cool guy. What's the vibe? Well, I approached him at a party, was married at the time.
Right, because most of their relationship for the second half of the movie is her being like, I just want to make it clear, this is not your baby. And he's like, I think it's my baby. And she's like, it's my husband's baby.
Might be dedicating a statue could be one day. Statue, Jesus.
Yeah.
I also like that they have the little boy back in the statue from a moment that only the postman remembers, and then the little boy is there as a grown man. He's like, that was me.
That was me. And the other guy's like, that was you. What? Giving him a letter? Sure. Didn't lots of people give him letters? Wasn't he a postman?
I don't know if it was in Waterworld Fallout or Robin Hood Fallout, but Kevin Reynolds had this incredible line. Because they would just fall out and then get back together again, right, and then fall out.
They were a warring couple.
Yeah. And he had this incredible line where he's like, I think Kevin should only direct his own movies from here on out. That way he always gets to work with his favorite movie star and his favorite director.
Which is a good
right.
Good
and
razz.
You read the reviews of this film, and the moment that just breaks them beyond repair is the statue, where they're like, this thing fucking ends with him putting a giant gold version of himself on screen.
That was the question I was going to pose to
and
you
basically
guys.
Having everyone pledge allegiance to them.
Obviously, this movie just ending with him being like, rule 1, no murder, is not amazing. But does it bring this movie down like a full star to then have an epilogue where they're like, in case you didn't get it, we think that guy was good.
Yes.
And here's a statue of him.
I was thinking about, have you ever read the novel A Canticle for Leibowitz? I'm going to assume not.
No.
It's one of my favorite, it's my favorite post-apocalyptic novel, that in the movie, that in the book Ridley Walker. Both of them are set long after a nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
Canticle for Leibowitz does a similar thing where it's like, what does religion look like after a nuclear war? It's a bunch of monks. They find this guy named Leibowitz's shopping list and they keep transcribing it, and it gradually evolves into a religion, and it follows 1,500 years of history. And I'm like, if this movie jumps 500 years later and now the male is a weird religion, that's a better ending. It's maybe a more nonsensical one, but.
You know what this movie reminded me of a lot while watching it? Original Planet of the Apes.
Sure.
And in the same way that like a lot of talking and like very methodically paced, that movie is very slow, the original, but it's also like well under 2 hours. But it has the same sort of like disorienting, like what's going on here. It takes about 40 minutes for like Heston to meet the apes. It's so deliberate in setting everything up, but it's going for the similar vibe of like the before times were so long ago that they've become abstracted. They're trying to treat this the same way as if it's the ape civilization that's being like disrupted by Heston's new ideas. And you're right that like the starting point of this movie needs to be further in the future. And the epilogue needs to be even further out.
Or just
from
that doesn't need to exist.
Sure.
The epilogue probably doesn't need to exist. Like, I think it really hurts the movie to be like, male made the world normal.
Yeah.
Like, can't I just imagine a better future is coming rather than just like truly like we clicked our fingers and there's
everything.
Fucking running water and like,
right.
you know, whatever else.
I needed to see the designing of the statue. I needed to see them cast it.
Well, that's the
I
spin-off.
needed to see them decide where to place it.
And I want to talk about the stamp economy.
Yeah.
They barely get into it in this film.
I mean, I'm certain that he would have been featured on at least one stamp.
Absolutely.
If not multiple.
That's what they should have ended on.
Oh my
Should have
God.
ended on the stamp.
Yes.
They should have ended on the stamp. It shouldn't have been a statue. It should have been a stamp.
And it just kind of doesn't look like him.
Yeah.
Like stamps never look. Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great. I think that the book would work better as a miniseries. The second section of the book, which is not touched on in this film at all, but is super good, like sets up the big bad as an AI that turns out to just be two guys who are like Oracle of Delphi style, being like, that seems like the answer. And I think that if you blended that with that would be a more novel villain than Bethlehem, but I think Costner's afraid of the sci-fi aspects of this tale.
Absolutely. I mean, the guy has only ever directed Westerns, and the furthest he's gone out of his comfort zone is Western combined with a different genre. And he's leaning more on the Western than the sci-fi.
I think not to be the person who comes on and just talks about the politics of filmmakers, but I think that Costner's politics are often read as conservative. And I think they broadly are, but they're more libertarian. He's like...
But he endorsed Mayor Pete and Joe Biden. Like he has this kind of like...
He was traditionally a deeply liberal kind of borderline radical guy, and he's a big environmentalist. And then over time, he's gotten a little more...
Right. I think he's got these crusty elements to him.
He's
kind of normie.
I think that him being on Yellowstone has vastly influenced that, because Yellowstone is a show that has more progressive politics than you'd expect, but also is watched by red states. So people are like, well, this is a show about how Donald Trump is good. And it's actually a show about how the social order is horribly broken, but it's the one we've got, so we might as well live with it.
Sure.
And also, I feel like Taylor Sheridan, it's like his politics on like Native Americans are fine, but there's a patronizing element to it.
Yeah.
There's the Wind River thing of like Jeremy Renner being like, I'm one of you. And being like, okay.
Yeah.
It's very much a thing of like, Taylor Sheridan will acknowledge this land was stolen unethically and horribly and immorally, and a bunch of people died in that process. But also, what are you going to do? That happens.
And this guy's pretty cool, isn't he?
Yeah, this guy's pretty great.
Yellowstone also, it's like Yellowstone's like Dallas. Like it's like a big frothy soap with
show.
Insane shit happening.
There is an episode where a bear chases two Chinese tourists off a cliff, and they're hanging to the side of the cliff. And then this guy, the main guy comes and is like going to rescue them, and they fall. But it's a bear, like it's the kind of show where a bear chases people off a cliff, and it's like wrongly understood as like Kevin Costner being like, now Donald Trump, he's the man. We gotta elect him again.
That's
the episode
all kind of in people's heads only. Right. Yeah.
The episode you just described probably got same day live ratings 3 times that of the finale of Succession.
Oh, absolutely. It got actually no, that was in season 1 when the show was barely watched. But it is. But like it was a slow building show, sort of like Breaking Bad. But I think that like Costner he has been like written off as like a very like radical in the past. I grew up in South Dakota, which is where Dances with Wolves was filmed. And like, there was this complicated relationship with that film there. But largely it's like when the movie comes to the small town, and everyone's like, oh my God, the movie star's going to sleep with me, but for a whole state. And we're still dining out on Dances with Wolves nostalgia, which is very weird because there's not a lot of it. But I think
there's some though. It was such a big movie.
I think that he is interested in the many ways in which the social order is broken and oppresses the wrong people, as long as people like Kevin Costner remain at the top of it.
I think that you're dead on with that.
And so this movie's about, we need a society, but it can't go as far as the book, which is like, society means you have to kind of let everybody live and like be themselves. It's like, well, but Kevin Costner still needs to be the leader.
And Kevin Costner's big philosophy in this movie seems to be like, should we be nice? Let's be nice to each other. Write each other letters and stuff.
Now it really sounds like Biden.
I'll see you later.
That was the thing that really hit me, is like we're living in this era when like people fucking hate each other, and like everybody wants their own sort of individually catered experience. And this movie is about like, no, society is about connection. And the first thing we would want after the end would be to connect with each other in some capacity. And like the way you do that is through the mail. But like it absolutely is, that moment when two tiny civilizations make contact and they can't be in touch with each other is so profound and beautiful. I don't know. This movie should be better.
It's also wild that this movie has been in 1997 before like internet culture has really like found its footing, and let alone like smartphones, where you're like, the mail being the thing would make so much more sense today, where you're like, well, this really is a form of communication that is almost alien to how we think about interacting with each other now, And there's so many things, like the way you're describing the book where you're like, this does sound like something that someone could readapt very well right now. But I do think more so than Waterworld, which, as we were saying, has sort of had its reputation restored in some way. This is like The Postman is toxic, like as a title. It's like that is inextricably tied to the notion of this guy losing the plot.
They should just call the TV series Gordon, the name of the
They
character.
should call it Gordon.
And it's also an Alf spinoff. So it's like The Postman meets Alf.
Or Postman.
Yeah.
Ben, do you know the Costner BP oil spill thing?
No.
Because I think this is just interesting to briefly touch on in relation to the politics stuff we're talking about.
I feel like we've talked about it years ago.
When the BP oil spill
Ocean
happened,
Therapy Solutions.
and everyone was like, this unfortunately is a problem with no solution. Things are just going to keep on getting worse. The ocean's on fire and animals are dying. Kevin Costner like showed up in the Senate and was like, I like off to the side have invested tens of millions of dollars of my own money into building a machine that can separate oil from water. And I've been working on that for a decade.
It's like a giant centrifuge that like spins oily water to separate them
And
out.
he's like, my brother's like a marine biologist and he's serious about this. And I've always cared about this issue. And I independently fund a bunch of scientific like experiments.
I believe they are used.
Yes.
Like the government bought them after
Correct.
Deepwater Horizon.
But like Kevin Costner just kind of showed up and was like, hey, by the way, I happen to have the solution for this exact problem, in a way that is very much in line with the way that people want to position the idea of like Bezos or Musk, of like, look at how responsibly they're using their money. And he has like a couple of times kind of successfully done that, but it does speak to this sense of like, we need to like connect and this needs to be a society, but also there needs to be like an amazing guy who shows up out of the shadows and stoically walks in and is like, I used my movie star money to make the perfect machine.
Which is so much
I'm
like,
your savior. You know?
It's so much of it is boomer liberalism. That is like, we need to come together as a society as long as I'm here leading the charge.
And
right,
like
and getting pats on the back.
He did not do as much of a public victory lap over that as you would expect. To the extent that like, you don't know that story. I think a lot of our listeners will not. He did like go and speak in front of like, you know, the fucking government. And it was televised and whatever. But it still was a little like, I'm just here to solve the problem.
There was also a thing where like Stephen Baldwin sued him and said he'd like cheated him out of money and then lost the lawsuit. And Kevin Costner was like, my name is more important than money. I need to beat this motherfucker.
Yeah.
Stephen Baldwin, of course, a normal person who doesn't do anything weird. Stephen Baldwin, one of those things where like, nah, Alec, you ain't out weirding me. I'm always going to be one step ahead.
Next movie for Costner after this is Message in a Bottle.
Yes, which is 2 years later and is like, you know, obviously kind of just not ignored, but it's just kind of like a shrug.
A winter Nicholas Sparks movie at an inflated budget.
After that
you're into Dragonfly in 13 days.
Excuse me. Don't forget For the Love of the Game. For Love of the Game, the Sam Raimi film.
Which we talked about.
We did.
Of course, you can go back to that episode, but that is the movie where he like completely torpedoes whatever he still has left, where he chooses to make that like his public battle of fighting the studio and being like, I do not endorse this movie that is coming out in theaters next week because they wouldn't let me make it 3 hours long.
And like say fuck 8 times and like maybe show like 3 or 4 inches of my dick. Yeah.
And there's the quote, which we read, that Universal put out, where they were like, first of all, we do not respect Kevin Costner taking a $50 million asset and holding it hostage in the press. Secondly, he's trying to present us as being anti-creative. We fully backed the vision of the director of this film, and his name is Sam Raimi, not fucking Kevin Costner. And that's the moment where they were like, this should be an easy layup for you. This is a $50 million sports movie. Like, go back to your safe spot. And he chose to burn it all down on that. I just want to say, Ben and I yesterday were digging into our stats on iTunes for the podcast because we were curious about like how recent episodes had done. And the way that Apple has changed their algorithm, it gives you like in real time, like what is sort of your highest episode ever and how does every episode perform relative to that? And it threw out that our most median episode ever is For the Love of the Game. So if you're looking at the performance of any episode, it goes, how does this compare to For Love of the Game?
That's awesome. With Olivia Craig.
The episode where the bit is Ben saying, I think I'm producing a perfect podcast. This is it. This is the best one. It just keeps saying in bold, most median.
I just want to say about his career. Message in a Bottle made money. Critics ignored it, but like whatever. For Love of the Game, bit of a underperformer. Then in 2000, he does 13 Days, which is like a very watchable movie and is seen as his potential comeback, but he does just about the worst Boston accent you ever heard. And he's a master of bad accents. And it like underperforms. Like the Oscars ignore it. It doesn't make a ton of money.
I think they did one of those like 1 week qualifying run, and then it actually got released
correct.
in February, and it didn't get the noms. And then by that point, New Line kind of gave up on it.
When in pandemic, I put that on, like being
That's a deeply solid movie.
Yeah. And I was like watching it, and I was like, it is a little like, it's a little spongy, like it's a little slow.
It should
like
be great.
it should be amazing, and instead it's just pretty good. Like Bruce Greenwood, incredible as Kennedy in it.
Yes.
Costner just playing sort of the JFK character, but not paranoid, but where he's just like, hey, Mr. President, how do you like these apples? Have you seen these missiles over in Cuba? Like he's not.
3,000 Miles to Graceland is arguably his all-time low. And then the
Never
next
seen that.
episode we'll talk about, Open Range, comes after that, where it's like,
Yeah, after that and Dragonfly, which is Tom Shadyac, so we'll cover that on the show one day.
but he's this level of guy where his stardom was so great for like a decade that it's he's always going to be a movie star to a degree. But at that point in time, it's like you are a deeply diminished movie star.
What do you think of 3,000 Miles to Graceland?
I've never seen it.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
No one's ever seen it.
I don't think it's a real movie.
It was one of those like Golden Raspberry movies where people didn't even bother. They just saw the poster and they were like, oh, you're telling me this one's bad. I can't believe it.
The other thing is, like, most of the films that we just listed were all like dumpuary releases. Like, he starts to become a king of dumpuary.
Obviously,
guy.
we should note, of course, the Postman won 5 Razzies. Worst actor, worst director, worst picture, worst screenplay, and then worst original song to the entire song selection. I don't even really remember their songs.
The songs in this movie there's a cover of Come and Get Your Love that's pretty fun.
Very
Did you
fun. I
listen?
liked that.
Did you wait through the credits for the song that Kevin Costner performs with Amy Grant? Because it
did
is
not. I love
truly bad.
I love to hear that he did that. That rocks.
You can find it on Spotify, everyone. Even if you haven't seen this movie, you should go listen to Kevin Costner.
I've maybe said this before. Draft Day was a fairly low budget movie. And so unlike I think most films he works on, everyone was in one hair and makeup trailer with like many seats. It wasn't his own trailer. And the cause got to control the sound system in that
Hell yeah.
hair and makeup trailer.
Okay.
And you'll never guess what his favorite band to listen to was in the makeup trailer every morning.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
That would have been my guess.
Casey and the Modern West.
Okay.
What the fuck is that?
Kevin Costner's band, of course.
That's
good
psycho.
for him.
And then the rap party for the film was one of his concerts.
Oh, good.
So I'm quite familiar with his
I can
musical.
get you a good rate on this.
I'm
For you, 10% off ticket, Newman. 10% off ticket price.
do you still talk to Cost all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're always
You
sending
text
him-
every
On
day?
Friendster.
Well,
We're
you guys-
writing on each other's
You send him
walls.
funny memes.
Yeah. No, I mean,
You write him letters.
yeah,
You print out the memes and mail
what
them
I
to him.
should have fucking said, Ben. 5 comedy points. I had such a wonderful time with him, truly, and I like have a very high impression of him. And I think he was like very kind to me and like gave me a lot of like guidance as an actor that I still think about to this day. And I genuinely question if he could like recognize me from a lineup. And I don't say that of any rudeness because it
He's done
felt
a
like
lot
he
of
was
movies,
like
right.
he would intimately lock into me. But I'm also like,
Maybe
is he
that's
like the
just his
postman
trick.
going from
Right.
town to town?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be offended. Like I wouldn't be like, how dare you not remember?
No, but it would be nice if you like ran into him, God knows how or when, and he would be like, Griffin. Like, that'd be cool.
I don't think he's come to New York in probably 20 years.
Well,
No.
Let's
Where the real actors are. I mean,
Right.
the last thing I think, the most recent thing he has said to me, and it's not even really to me, was at the premiere of Draft Day. I went up to him and I was like, hey, Kevin, congrats. The movie turned out great. You're so good in it. And he just, as I finished the sentence, turned over to Ivan Reitman, who was standing next to him, and said like,
I told you the kid was going to be good.
That's pretty cool.
It was cool, but I was also like, you're saying it as if I'm not next to you.
It's cool though. That's
It
the
was
kind of
cool.
movie star shit I'd be
It was
pulling
cool.
if I was.
It was cool. But it was even already a statement of
dick
like,
stuff,
I'm taking
right.
credit for saying that he was going to be good, which was nice.
Yeah.
It made me feel like my dad approved of me. Like
It'd be
it
better
was,
than like if he was just like to Reitman, like lose the kid,
right.
get him out of here.
So I work on Yellow Jackets, which is on a Paramount network.
True.
And so I am co-workers with Kevin well, not for much longer because he's left Yellow.
Not
Right.
at all.
Your,
Right.
your
He's-
show is on Showtime plus Paramount Plus,
Yes.
whereas he is on Paramount plus Showtime.
Something like that. Yeah.
To be clear, he's not on
right.
Yellowstone anymore.
They
But you are both working on Yellow Show.
Yellow shows, yeah.
Yellow
I believe that
Couple yellow bellies.
Yeah, I feel like you have to discuss Yellowstone and Yellow Jackets at the same time.
Yes.
It boosts me. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
But they did like a sizzle reel of like, here's all of our shows talking about important emotions and things like that. And there's one clip from Yellowstone in it, and it's basically Kevin Costner being like, I have feelings sometimes. And like, I think
Okay,
the
Kev.
Postman, I think he's such a vulnerable screen presence.
Yes.
Before the Postman, and the Postman totally breaks him. He doesn't know how to be vulnerable anymore. He tries to be, but it's all out of whack.
Yeah.
I think I'm so sad that people know him as the Yellowstone guy and assume that he loves Donald Trump and assume that he has no feelings because he was so soulful.
I
so
agree.
long.
sensitive.
That's
Yes.
always been his superpower
Right,
as a
it's his
movie
secret.
star
Yeah.
is like he's this stoic like oak tree, and when that gives a little bit and it breaks and he gives you a little bit of emotion, it's like so affecting. And I see like a lot of, I think, to target Gen Z, but I will see comments from people who are like, I don't understand how this guy became such a major movie star. He feels really flat to me.
Right.
He's got this sort of affect in every performance at the
Like,
same energy
why was
level.
this one of the big actors of the 80s?
Right,
and 90s?
but it was like, first off, I think he is a little bit undervalued at the craft of his acting. And I think we've called out several of the performances where he did not have the movie star weight on him and he felt the freedom to just act. And I think very often as a movie star, he is functioning as, he's approaching it as a storyteller first and foremost, right? Even in movies where he's not directing it, he is, I think, always thinking about the big picture of the story, how the audience is going to interpret it, what are the story beats that make people, like, that pull them in, that push them away, all that sort of stuff. So there's something very, like, big picture in the way he approaches, like, steering the ship of a movie. And he also just understands the effectiveness of, like, he has such a good understanding of how he plays on camera, the effect of his voice, like all these things, which when you watch a movie like this, it is so frustrating to see him misapply it.
He is very good on Yellowstone. Like, they give him no good material, but he's playing Western Logan Roy, and he's just like locked into what that guy needs to be, and they just don't give him the stuff.
The motherfucker just like never doesn't have presence, and he just belongs on screen. And I saw the Horizon trailer in a theater recently, and like the first sort of major close-up they give him in that trailer where I feel like he slowly turns in, and it's the kind of like extended longing look you talk about. I saw that and I was just like, Jesus Christ, this guy belongs up here. You know, after like such a weird arc of like movies, TV, back to movies, back to TV, whatever, you're like, something about him wearing a cowboy hat and his head being 100 feet tall and him just sort of squinting and looking off into the distance. Like, he's just one of the great like special effects we still have.
He looks good on a dang horse.
He looks great on a dang horse.
Play the box office game. I should first tell you.
Can I just say, is this one we've done before?
Yes, it is.
Because I remember
You've done this
vivid-
one as well before?
No. This is one you've done before. I remember this vividly because I saw this film in theaters and had so many other options that I should have taken.
Is it
This
the
is-
same weekend as Titanic?
No, it's not. But
Okay.
this is a time we have come to many times in the history of Blank Check. Now, of course, The Postman cost $80 million to make. It made 17 domestic. But wait a second, let's check the worldwide numbers. Oh, 20. Okay. 20 worldwide. So it was a gigantic flop.
I saw it in a theater with one person. It was a man in a cowboy hat. And at the end of it, he stood up and pointed at me and said, "Someone needs to tell that man no."
Oh my God.
I was like,
I
okay.
can't believe you've been
even
sitting on
Cowboy
that
Hat
all
Guy.
episode. That is incredible. Yeah.
He'd even lost Cowboy Hat Guy.
But that
Yes, it's
speaks
opening
to the culture's relationship to him at that point. It wasn't just fucking
It
Hollywood
was-
Reporter writing about him this way.
It was a follow-on thing from Westworld
Right.
and all this other stuff.
Everyone was like, this guy needs to fucking have a timeout.
the film got bad reviews. It opened in the midst of Titanic becoming a phenomenon.
Sure. So what
and
weekend is this for Titanic?
2. And I just also want to point out, this is an interesting note from JJ. This is the going postal era, where like that's a big news story and like kind of Letterman gag.
That is
like
wild.
the post office
Yeah.
and Postman are not like hugely high in credibility at this moment. And so there's a lot of gags about like a movie where the postman is a hero, like get the fuck out of here or whatever.
It's the one thing that's aged best is like now
Okay.
you're like, I wish the
Yeah.
government functioned.
Number 1 at the box office though, Griffin, on
Weird
December.
also, this movie has no jokes about dogs hating him.
Should have jokes about that.
Oh, there is one joke.
Really?
When he first arrives,
You're right.
yeah, he says something about the dogs have to be leashed.
Would have been better with Robin Williams. Hey, Blank Check listeners. This is Emily from the future. We recorded this Postman episode in April, and I am recording this now in July, shortly before the episode drops. I have now finished reading the novel, The Postman, and I am amazed at how much of the weirdest shit in the film, The Postman, including the term body father, is from the novel, The Postman. I did not make that clear enough in this episode as we recorded it. I feel truly bad about that. I don't want to blame Kevin Costner or anyone else involved in this film for coming up with some of the weirder stuff about Abby and about the postman sleeping with Abby, because a lot of that is from the book, although they don't run off together at the end of the book. Spoilers for the book, I guess. Also, I wish to apologize. I doubted David when he said there would be a surprise Bluey episode. There was indeed a surprise Bluey episode. If that made it into the cut, I apologize to all of you for being wrong about something for the first time in my life. All right, thank you. Back to the past.
December 26th, December 26th, 1997. What's number 1? The Postman is opening to number 9.
Okay, it's Titanic again, still, right?
Titanic
Right.
is number 1 at the box
I'm
office,
trying to think.
growing 24%.
I'm trying to think what made
But
us
it's probably going to
cover
top out at like 150.
this weekend before. Is this the as good as it gets weekend?
Correct.
There we go.
So number 2 though is what opened with Titanic. We've covered it on this Patreon.
We covered it on Patreon.
Yeah, come on, you know.
It's Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yes, Tomorrow Never Dies
Yeah.
is number 2.
Okay.
Also doing well, though not Titanic well. And opening new number 3 is As Good as It Gets, $16 million, and it's going to have a very healthy run and make
That's
150.
Yeah, Jesus.
Great
Yeah.
movie. So you got those 3. Number 4 is a family film,
Okay.
family comedy.
101 Dalmatians?
No.
That's 96, I think.
Yes, that's 96.
Okay.
Definitely a movie you like. Probably liked it at the time.
Oh, is it Mouse Hunt?
Oh, Emily.
Mouse
I know
Hunt.
this weekend.
Or Verbinski's Mouse Hunt, which is also expanding and doing well. It's Christmas time.
You know what's great?
Weird ass movie.
When David Krumholtz called out how well directed Mouse Hunt is.
He did.
Yeah.
Did we do that episode yet? Yes. We
Yeah, it will come out.
I
Yeah,
can't keep anything straight in my head.
me neither. This is, Emily, this is the first time we realize, largely because we're doing 3 short directors in a row, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, each
3
day
different
we're doing a
directors.
different miniseries.
Yeah. We did Cone, now Costner, tomorrow Breast. Number 5 at the box office. Opening this week in a somewhat baffling Christmas release is a great film. My favorite film of 1997, probably.
It's not LA Confidential?
No. Great movie. That's number 20. It's a book adaptation by a director who's definitely gets talked about a lot.
It's a book adaptation by a director who definitely gets talked about a
I
lot.
mean, it's like a really, really, really important director. It's his big follow-up to a gigantic movie.
It's his big follow-up to a gigantic movie, and it's a book adaptation. It's your favorite movie of 1997.
It was a mild hit, made 40 mil. Certainly, come down from his last film. And in terms of hype, also a come down.
Was the previous film a blockbuster, or was it just like a big awards film?
Big awards film that made a ton of money.
It was both.
Yeah, it's one of the most consequential films ever made in American history.
Oh, it's Jackie Brown.
Correct. I mean, how do you describe Pulp Fiction?
No, you're right.
The most seismic cultural event of the 90s in cinema,
Right, and
basically.
It was his like big idea of like, isn't it funny to release this movie on Christmas?
They
And
had
everyone,
the whole Santa's got a brand new bag ad campaign.
everyone felt like it backfired.
Yes.
And then like 15 years later, he does it again with Django and it fucking works. Where they counter program Django on Christmas Day and it explodes. His highest grossing film.
Django is. Jackie Brown certainly is not. Do you like Jackie Brown?
I love Jackie Brown.
Incredible
I
movie.
think it's my favorite.
I think
Tarantino.
it's my favorite.
It always has been. Been meaning to give it a rewatch, but I've seen it so many times.
It's so fucking good.
Number 6 at the box office is Scream 2,
Mm.
which came out just less than a year after Scream 1, of course. It is making tons of money. Number 7, opening new this week, is the incredibly ill-advised remake of An American Werewolf in
Sequel.
London. It's a
Not
sequel,
remake,
right?
yeah.
It's not a remake. It's a sort of a Lego sequel, I guess,
Julie
before that
Delpy and
existed.
Tom Everett Scott.
Correct. Directed by Anthony Waller.
Well, of course.
The film is called, yes, American Werewolf in Paris.
Yeah.
Number 8 is Flubber.
This was an era where anytime anything was even vaguely French, I assume my mother would be thrilled about it. And I remember walking past the poster in a theater and go, "The Werewolf's in Paris. You're going to want to see that, right?"
He was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Number
Flubber?
8 is Flubber in its 5th weekend.
What?
The Postman couldn't knock off Flubber in his 5th weekend.
What if the Postman had Flubber?
I don't know. I think chaos would have. Huh.
Flubber was
Wait a
big,
second.
Flubber was a big flubbered hit.
Flubber was a modest flubbered hit.
What'd it get to? 98?
92. Pretty good. For a movie as bad and stupid as Flubber,
Yeah.
not bad. For a movie that's like the big Disney like Thanksgiving family movie with Robin Williams, maybe a little under.
I know this isn't the reality. I know it was 2 different eras of development on this project, but it's funny to imagine create the fake idea of Robin Williams standing above a desk and one script says The Postman and one says Flubber.
What do I do? Number 9, new this week, is The Postman. And number 10, luckily, The Postman could beat out the first weekend of Mr. Magoo, the Leslie Nielsen film where he plays the blind cartoon
A
character.
deeply bizarre film.
I have not seen it.
A
I
film
skipped that one.
directed by Stanley Tong, who
Yeah.
directed a lot of Jackie Chan's best movies.
Right,
On
and I'm
paper,
sure physical humor, right?
Right.
Mr. Magoo, he's gonna miss. He'll be walking, right, and the thing misses him.
He'll be on a construction site.
Right, he
and
goes
then they'll
up, he
pick
goes
up a
down.
beam, and yeah.
Hollywood's been struggling to figure
We
out.
all know Mr. Magoo.
Yeah. Hollywood's been struggling to figure out how to use Jackie Chan, right? They're constantly going like, what other franchises can we plug Leslie Nielsen, our greatest 7-year-old movie star, into? They land on Mr. Magoo and then they're like, oh, why wouldn't you hire the fucking Jackie Chan director to do the funny action in your family comedy? And the movie is like inert. It has an opening credit sequence. I saw this in theaters. It has an opening credit sequence that is animated with classic Magoo. And when it transitions from animation to live action, you're like, I think we just left the best part of the movie. I think the entire reason I came to the theater to see Mr. Magoo in the flesh is starting, and now everyone is bored immediately.
Take us out. Next week we have Open Range, which is not even a comeback for him, but it's kind of like a reputation comeback for him. Which is a great film. I'm sorry you couldn't cover that film.
Oh, no, listen. I
You
like to,
wrote us a long email saying you wanted The Postman.
when Lynch won, I was like, fuck, I love Lynch. And then I was like, but I've already committed to The Postman. I was like, gotta do it.
You had mailed your letter.
Gotta do it. My final Postman story is New Year's Eve, 97, hanging out with some friends. And we're like, let's go see Titanic. And they're like, we gotta get time to see Titanic. And somewhere in the middle of that, I'm like, well, let's not see The Postman, because I'd seen it and was like, it's bad. And then we're all out for dinner beforehand, and this other group of people come in, having not been able to get tickets to Titanic. And the woman with them is so furious, and she's mad, and she's screaming. And I'm like, that angry girl is too much. Reader, I married her. That was the first time I met my wife.
What?
Wow.
And I have Titanic to thank, but also tangentially The Postman.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
The Postman. Not really, though.
I did not
Kevin
say,
Costner's like, the Postman is the hero of this story.
and they were
It
like,
should end with a statue of him.
You're welcome, Emily.
and they were, yeah, they were like, what are you going to do instead? And my wife was like, we're just going to go watch videos. And so I did not get a chance to tell her not to see The Postman, which would have been like the first time we talked.
Kevin Costner hears this story because he's, of course, a rabbit blankie and solemnly tips his cap, looks off into the distance and says,
Guess my wedding invite must have gotten lost in the mail.
Emily,
Griffin, take us out.
Yellow Jackets, do we know when new season's coming?
I don't know. I'm guessing early 2025. But yeah, go watch the first 2 seasons. I didn't have anything to do with them, but it's one of my favorite shows. I'm so lucky to get to work on it. And
it's very exciting that you're
I am writing episode 6 of the new season. So when that episode airs, everyone needs to watch it just to show that the blank check bump applies to premium cable shows. Yeah. I co-host a podcast. Let's see, this is coming out in July August?
21st. Late July.
Okay, so we are very shortly switching over to being podcast like it's the 2000s. We're going to be covering the decade of the 2000s, split up into miniseries. Our first one is the 10 highest grossing films of the 2000s. I have several books coming out. My novel Woodworking comes out in April 2025. I am very proud of it. It's a very good book. Everybody, but right now it's available for pre-order. So just go to Amazon and
good for sale.
Hit refresh.
But there will be a link in the description.
So
by April, we'll probably be doing Shadyac, right? So if you want to put your chips down on Dragonfly right now.
Oh, absolutely. And finally, my most
I don't know what that movie's like.
Just flying around, filled with calm.
My most proximate thing is in September, I have a book coming out about the TV show Lost that you can and should buy. It's called Back to the Island. I wrote it with my former AV Club colleague, Noel Murray. You can find me on all social platforms at Emily St. Jams. I'm primarily on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, but I do other things.
Why? The other ones are good.
Yeah, they're all great. Yeah. They're wonderful.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Take us out so I can ask you a scheduling question. What were you going to say? Sorry, Emily.
I was just saying I love being on the show. It's a great time. I love you guys.
And you tried to interrupt that nice sentiment
compliment
from our friend. Emily, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for helping to produce the show. AJ McKeon for our editing. AJ McKeon's also our production coordinator. Leigh Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song, Joe Bow and Pat Reynolds for our artwork, JJ Birch for our research. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon, Blank Check special features, which, as we said, we're doing Waterworld over there. Ben is pointing at a screen. What do you have to say?
This date will be our final entry in our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles commentary series.
Wow.
Mutant Mayhem, which you may be surprised to hear, Ben loved.
Good movie. Good movie.
Blew my pants off.
It was a first-time watch for him.
Oh, wow.
And you get to hear him get very excited in real time.
I slam and scream a lot. Also, because we haven't done this in a little while, we do unlock.
We have the free tier on our Patreon. Every 10 days, we unlock an episode from 3 years ago for public consumption.
And so that is actually the final entry in our Twilight commentary series.
And that was quite a good series.
It was.
If I might say so myself, with 3 years distance. Yes. I think that was a fun one. And certainly the New Moon episode with our friend Chris Weitz, the director of that movie, I highly recommend.
Absolutely.
Now it's free. We're giving it back to the people.
You can listen to that on Patreon as well as available on Spotify.
Yeah, you can link those things up.
Just search on Spotify, Blank Check Special.
Yeah. Tune in next week for Open Range. And as always, the real mail was the comely shot along the way.
Oh, I know.
No?
That's a perfect ending.
It's a perfect ending.
That's Pulitzer Prize winning.
Thank you.
Yeah.